There we go. Would you please silence your cell phones for this? If a cell phone rings, it's a $50 fine, gets to go to the wildlife fund. Is that? I'm gonna do a roll call. Commissioner Bell,
Present.
Commissioner Haskell,
Present.
Commissioner Lundball,
Present.
Commissioner Mai, Commissioner Mai, are you there? We got him.
Mr. President, I am here. Sorry to cause the issue again.
Okay, you're present. Commissioner Masterson? Here. Commissioner Roberts? Here. And I am Commissioner Jolovich. Here's the instructions for public who would wish to address the commission. On any agenda item, please fill out a comment form located at the registration table and hand it to one of the department staff who will forward it to me. Assisting with the meeting today is Tara Hodges, Cody Region Information and Education Person. If you're participating via Zoom, you should have submitted an advanced comment form prior to the start of the meeting. If you would still like to comment on an agenda, please contact the host of the meeting. As we work through the agenda, the public will have an opportunity to address the commission to ensure everyone has an opportunity to speak, and as a courtesy to others, please limit your time. And commissioners, when you speak, make sure you got the red button on. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to elect a new president and vice president. So I'd like to open the floor for nominations for the president of the Game and Fish Commission. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President Pro Tem, I would move as Commission President, Commissioner Ashley Lundvall, and as Vice President, Commissioner Mark Jolovich.
You want
As
to
a
do
slate.
You want to do both at once? Okay.
I would, my motion is as a slate. Yes, so yeah, put together.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Masterson.
Second.
Accept nomination of Commission President and Vice President. Are there any other nominations? No? If not, all in favor of electing Commissioner Lundvall for President and Commissioner Jolovich, myself, for Vice President, please give me a vote of aye for yes.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Okay, it passed, so we have a new president. I'd like to congratulate Ashley Lundvall. And thank you all for voting for me for vice president again. So we'll swap places. Let's take a 5-minute break so we can do a little swapping up here. Thank you. Okay.
Or meeting minutes, excuse me.
Madam President, I move to approve the open session minutes from January 2025 commission meeting.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any debate or discussion? All right, all those in favor of moving those minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Director Bruce.
Congratulations, President Lovell. Commissioners, good to see you today. First of all, I'd like to welcome the two new commissioners to the team. Fonzie Haskell, great to have you on board. Fonzie is from Crook County. Family is near Moorcroft, if I'm right about that. He is an outfitter and a manager. He has also been part of the Crook County Predator Management District. We're very pleased to have your perspective join the board today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Virtual joining us today is Bill Mai from Centennial. Bill, I hope you can hear me.
I can't hear you.
Great. Bill has a BS in range management and an MBA. He's part of the Pilot Hill Board, and he spent a good chunk of his career doing policy work at the state at many levels. So, Bill, we're excited for your input and perspective on this board as well.
Thank you, Director. Very sorry to not be there in person. I just had shoulder surgery and just didn't feel like it was a prudent thing to do to risk driving on iffy roads with one hand. So we'll see you for sure in April.
Thank you. Yes, those roads this morning were particularly fun, so I do not blame you at all. I would take a minute to welcome some new members to the leadership team here at Game and Fish. One is a new face. I want to welcome our PIO, Amanda Fry. Amanda is from Wyoming. She did leave us for a few years and go to New Mexico and work for the Forest Service, so we're glad to have her back in the state. Other members of the leadership team are familiar faces to you, but have stepped up into a leadership role that we're grateful for. Our new Services Chief, Sean Bippy. And replacing him as the Deputy Chief in Services, Ray Bradyhoff. Is Ray here today? Oh, Ray's not here today. Okay. And then one more, when Doug Brimmeyer stepped into the Deputy Director role, his spot as Deputy Chief of Wildlife was filled with Martin Hicks. Next, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about our legislative session that just wrapped up over a week ago. Doug Brimmeyer, Deputy Director, will give a more thorough recap of the session, but I thought I'd talk about a few highlights or takeaways. Definitely a very active and busy session. I'd like to thank the three commissioners that serve on the legislative subcommittee, Commissioner Masterson, Commissioner Bell, and Commissioner Roberts, very much engaged. Thank you for your input and your testimony on some of the bills. One highlight, and I think one of the greatest things to come from this session, is a bill that allocated $49.5 million to fire recovery and prevention. This will go for preventing and treating invasive annual grasses, habitat restoration, and focus also on conifer encroachment. Definitely glad to see that funding available, and a lot of our habitat folks will be using that and putting it on the ground. Another bill that got lots of attention, but provides another tool for our wildlife management, is removing otters from the protected language in statute. This bill had a lot of confusion to the public. Removing the word protected doesn't necessarily mean they're not protected. It moved into the non-game status, which therefore gave our managers the ability to deal with conflict otters, especially on private property. Now they can trap them and remove them and be able to deal with them, which when they were under that other statute, they couldn't. Another friendly one that was nice to see is now you have the ability to purchase a conservation plate from your county. Previous to that, you could only purchase it from WYDOT. This will, we believe, will lead to additional conservation licenses and therefore more funding opportunities for wildlife crossings. Excited to see all of those. We also had one that will impact the department quite a bit. This is dealing with regulating and registering fishing outfitters and guides. This conversation has been going on for at least a decade, and it will continue to go on because what this bill does is it has the commission appoint an advisory committee to advise you guys how to move forward. We currently have a call for requests of folks who want to be part of that advisory committee, and we'll be bringing those back to you for consideration. What that advisory committee will do, it will help advise both the commission and the department how to set up the registration of those boating outfitters and guides. And then what does regulation look like? And should it remain within the commission's hands? Currently, the legislation said that the commission may regulate and may register. We're interested to have this discussion with the advisory board and you guys to see and develop how this looks like going forward. The Travel, Rec, and Wildlife Committee was very adamant about continuing to get this right. They know this is complicated. They know this is new for the state, and they really wanted to take some time, work on it, and bring it back to them. Part of the bill was to bring it back to them by November with the recommendations. Next, there were a couple bills that if they did go forward, it would have had substantial impacts on the department and the authority of the commission. One of those is to highlight is it would have limited your ability to set quotas and limits for mountain lions. That bill did not go forward. Another one would have closed the door on us working to delist grizzly bears, and that one did not go forward. And then another highlight for me that I took away from this session is there were two bills that really had the ability or the potential to divide landowners and sportswomen and men. However, they didn't. In fact, they brought the conversation between the two groups closer together. One of those was dealing with a bill that was passed last year and modifying it, Senate File 118, dealing with a restoration area for bighorn sheep at the Sweetwater Rocks. This amended the date of effectiveness. The landowners really wanted it. And because the landowners came to session and testified, it really helped us progress that conversation forward instead of dividing those who want sheep on the landscape versus those who maybe don't or have some concerns. Another one that did a similar thing was a bill that would have allowed transferable landowner license. The sports women and men were pretty vocal on not wanting this bill, and had the ability, we sought an opportunity to sit down with the sponsor of the bill and other landowners and legislators to have a conversation about what this really meant. And really where we landed on is it wasn't about so much of a transferable landowner license, but it was more about finding a way to keep multi-generational landowners on the landscape in Wyoming. What are some additional revenue sources and some tools that would allow them to keep operating? And so this group of folks agreed to continue the conversation over the next months and see if we can't land on another solution. From here, you know, the session just ended a couple weeks ago, and we already are talking interim topics and where we will go in April. So the Management Council will meet April 8th, and they will decide what those interim topics are for the committees to work on. The department put several topics forward. We do anticipate that TRW may take up mule deer, everything with mule deer. Really what we are talking about there is looking at the status of mule deer and all the impacts that are influencing the population right now, to bring folks up to speed on what the department can and cannot do regarding that. We also brought an interim item forward that discussed educating folks on what our WHMAs are, our wildlife habitat management areas, and our access programs, and reviewing those. There were 14 pages of proposed interim items in TRW alone, so we'll be curious to see what Management Council ends up on. Another one that we do have our eye on that was proposed in joint ag was those transferable landowner license again. So we do anticipate that that conversation might be continuing. So last week, I had the opportunity along with Deputy Director Doug Brimmeyer and Deputy Chief of Wildlife Martin Hicks to attend the North American Fish and Wildlife Conference. And I just briefly wanted to talk about that because this is our national professional organization. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to attend these things. And it had a much different feeling this year. This meeting, we usually have 300 to 500 federal employees, and I think we had less than a dozen. So definitely a gap in those conversations and working on. One of the committees I chair is the Threatened and Endangered Species Committee. And so having the federal agencies involved in that committee is extremely important. But one of the things that I always take away from this committee, there's lots of meetings and lots of networkings, but really looking for the opportunity when we can find those common connections across state agencies that we can work on things together. So you might not be surprised, but how we think of the Endangered Species Act here is a lot different than some other states, especially when we consider our eastern states or Midwestern states. But through conversations, we can find those common ground where we all think there needs to be change or reform. And so that's really what these meetings are about, is finding those common entities, common priorities that we can work on together. And then last or not least, I did want to just touch on the new federal leadership coming in place. You guys are well aware that retired Director Brian Nesvik, he will have his confirmation hearing next week on the 26th. We're looking forward to that. I did a few weeks ago get an opportunity to meet with the new BLM director, Kathleen Sagama. Very encouraging meeting, got to hear what her priorities are and got to express our concerns, especially related to the Rock Springs RMP, the Sage-Grouse RMP, and other things we've discussed in the past. And then another one that you might have read about in the paper is Karen Budd Fallon, attorney from Cheyenne, who will also be working under Secretary Burgum. She will not be in a confirmed position, and so she's starting work right away, I believe this week. And her focus is mostly going to be on areas of the Endangered Species Act. So we'll be working closely with her and looking at ways that we can make it more efficient. With that, I'll just stand for any questions.
Madam President, may I?
I don't know if this is the first thing I want to do as Madam President. Yeah, Commissioner Masterson.
The record show that I'm the first one who got to say Madam President. Director, thank you for the report. Just a couple quick questions. The money that was set aside for habitat, I believe you said it was 49.5 million. Who will make the decision as to allocation of those funds?
Madam President, Commissioner Masterson, there will be an advisory team. The money is being flowed through the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust under Director Bob Budd. And so currently there's an RFP out right now, so a request for proposals that entities such as our agency will submit proposals with projects that, as long as they meet the qualifications, should get funded and the money flow back out the door.
Thank you. And can you, in just real quick, remind me where things sit today with the Rock Springs RMP and the Sage Grouse plant?
Madam President, Commissioner Masterson, I'll try to do that really briefly. The Rock Springs RMP and with our conversations with the new BLM director, still working through the nuances of that. We think we can do, because it is final, it will need an amendment for changes to be made. So looking at amendment in order to do that for the Rock Springs RMP. The Sage Grouse BLM amendment, however, is not final. So we are looking at one of two options. 2 states have already signed their ROD, their record of decision. The rest of the states have not. We recently sent a letter to Secretary Burgum asking him to continue to allow us to work on it, because one of the executive orders that came out said, please pause everything. And we don't want to pause this one. We want to charge forward and get it finished. That sentiment seemed to be shared with Kathleen. And so what we're looking at in Wyoming is how do we get to a ROD that matches the state executive order? We're exploring if we may or may not need to do a supplemental to address the few little nuances left to get it right. So we're about 90% there. We just are looking at the finish to get a rod, hopefully yet in 2025.
Madam President. Director Bruce, the TRW and Mule Deer, what should we expect from that?
Madam President, Commissioner Roberts, that's a good question. You know, we have been verbalizing a lot about mule deer lately. You guys are well aware, Deputy Chief Justin Benefit will give a follow-up presentation at this meeting regarding the results of last fall's meetings with the public. And really what we're looking at is where do we go from here? We now have additional data from the public. We know all the different pressures placed on mule deer. What I would like people to become more aware of is there are so many things within the department's ability to influence mule deer population, and there's a lot of things not within our ability. And some of those things not within our ability are things that are happening out on the landscape. Anywhere from siting of renewable energy to urban sprawl and housing developments that really fall outside of the department. And so I'm hoping that conversation gets sorted out of, you know, the department will and continue to do everything we can for mule deer, but we are limited. And with that conversation, there could be possible ideas for legislation that could affect those other things. Thank you.
Deputy Director.
Good afternoon, Madam President, Director Bruce, members of the commission. Next on your agenda, number 4, and this is an easy one, but we will need a vote on this, and this is to change the May retreat dates. Currently, they're scheduled for Tuesday and Wednesday, the 20th and 21st of May. And the request is to move them to Monday and Tuesday, the 19th and 20th. And this is just as a result of the Governor Sportsperson Forum being on Wednesday, the 21st. If there's any questions?
Madam President, I would move to approve the change of the dates for the commission retreat to Monday through Tuesday, May 19th through 20th, 2025.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That was an easy one.
Madam President?
Yes, sir.
Eric, this doesn't have anything to do with this change of date. I was curious whether, well, let me start this way. As the timing looks like it will play out, our meeting where we discuss landowner licenses will be in July. And as we know, we set the location and the dates of our meetings at the beginning of the year. So it just happens that that meeting will be in Evanston. And I am completely behind moving our meetings to different districts and different parts of the state. I think that's a great thing. I've received a number of communications from folks indicating that they're concerned about having that meeting in a corner of the state, making it more difficult for them to travel to it. I'm not asking for any action to be taken, but I was curious whether any other commissioner has heard that same concern or whether it's worth investigating. And I'm not saying put it in Casper. I'm just saying, should it be a more central location, Riverton, Lander? I just wanted to see if anybody else has heard that or it's a concern. Thank you.
Madam President, I've heard those same concerns and let it be known that Commissioner Masterson really does want this to be in Casper. I'm just kidding, but I think those concerns are that they want to make sure there's ample time for public comment. And we do have, I think that public comment on landowner licenses is going to come out around April 18th-ish. And so I really recommend that folks put those comments, even if they're going to make public comment via Zoom or, virtually or in person, submit those comments either in writing also, just to make sure you get your comments in. And this is not a easy topic. It's I'm intimately involved with this for seems like 5 years now. And we want to make sure we do a good job with this and we make sure we hear everybody. And so I have heard those same concerns that Commissioner Masterson. I'm not saying that we should move that meeting, but we can maybe look at what the next steps are, and if we can take public comment on that. Again, maybe we'll just have to look and see what that looks like, if that works.
Yeah, and if you guys want us to look at opportunity for making it centralized, you can ask us that, and we can always bring it back as an agenda item in April.
Madam President, I will go, obviously with the consensus of the commission. If this is a concern that isn't shared, then I'll certainly go along with what the group chooses. Obviously it's happenstance. It wasn't by design, but it's just something I've heard. So thank you.
Logistically, could we look into that?
Madam President, logistically, we could. Yeah, we could look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Director.
Good afternoon, Madam President, Director Bruce, members of the commission. It's a little odd for me to be standing up here without a PowerPoint, but I wanted to give you a little overview of the legislative session today. And we really, as Director Bruce mentioned, we appreciate the engagement from the subcommittee and from our staff and Ben as well this past session. You may remember that we've had employees rotating through for the entire session. So each week we'd start off with folks from around the state that would be giving us some of their expertise on whether it's law enforcement, regulation development, or if it was biological components of some of the species that were in some of these draft bills. Those folks would develop talking points for the director's office and others that would be testifying. And so if you remember from some of those updates I sent out, we had a link on there that showed you what bills we testified on, what the bills were that were out there. And those folks would develop points for us to make sure that we covered during those committee meetings when we testified. We also had one volunteer that we pull from the field that we asked around the state if anyone wants to give up. This year it was 8 weeks of their time to come down and learn about the legislative process and to help us track things. And this year that was Matt Pollock from Casper. And I say they give up their task at the regional level, but in actuality, they're kind of pulling a little bit of double duty, but because they want to stay tuned into what's going on. So I know Matt was keeping track of things going on in the Casper region while at the same time watching what's going on with our testimony and the draft bill. So it was really a busy session, as the director mentioned. And it was quite a lift for everybody. At the height of the session, we were tracking 35 bills. And when I say we're tracking those are ones that the legislative folks that were rotating through the Cheyenne office were developing talking points for us and making sure that we were tuned into changes that were going on the floor at the legislature. Of those 35, then we kind of tracked them through the session, and you saw on that bill tracking sheet that a lot of those were crossed off as we moved through the session because some of them didn't make it through committee, as the director mentioned. And then we also were tracking monitoring another 41 bills that were basically had the potential to impact us. And we were just trying to see if we needed to be prepared to testify on those. And as the director mentioned, there was a number of bills that were signed into law. You can still look at that LSO website and you can look at the enrolled acts And you can see a summary in that column of what bills have made it through and which ones have been enrolled for into statute. So, and as the director mentioned, House Bill 45 was really that was the otter, removing otters as protected animals. And it was really pretty comical to see the interactions among the legislators when they debated this. It was, they kind of looked at it as a little bit of a good humor in terms of cohesiveness amongst their relations with each other, because they jab each other a little bit about how they were approaching things with that bill. So it was pretty interesting to testify on that. We did have some publics that were very concerned about that. But from a biological standpoint, we felt pretty good with where that bill's at now, and we can make some modifications to our some of the statutes in our website to make sure that we're covered on that. Another bill was Senate File 88, which is the Wildlife Natural Resource Trust large project funding. That one goes through every year, and that funded some projects, as the director mentioned. And Senate File 149 was the wildlife conservation plates, and that's so anyone in the state can go to their local treasurer and get their vehicle plate locally instead of filling out a form and send it in. So a lot easier for our publics, and hopefully we'll see an uptick in some of those plate sales. As the director mentioned, fishing outfitters and guides, we'll be continuing to work on that one. Another one, Senate File 127, was the administrative rules and legislative review and objection. This bill related to administrative procedures, and that if there is a $1 million change in a rule, a state rule that adversely affected the state's either direct or indirect economics, it would require a review. And so we're still we're still evaluating that one. Not sure where that one's going to fall out for us. House Bill 211 was the hunting from vehicles, and this basically allowed people to be able to shoot certain vehicles from their vehicles, and that one passed as well. House Bill 275 was the treatment of animals, and that one provided a misdemeanor offense and addressed actions where wildlife were reduced to possession, so it prohibited torture. And then Senate File 179 was sage grouse compensatory mitigation, and that related to Northeast Wyoming and landowners being able to conduct some conservation actions on their collective properties. And so that was a bill that was pretty good to see move forward. As the director mentioned, there were some notable bills that did not make it that we were glad to see did not go through, including the bear coupon bill, mountain lion bill, and then there was the landowner licenses, as well as the preference and bonus points, which was pretty up in the air for us. We testified on it a couple different times. Commissioner Bell came to Cheyenne twice, and we thought we were going to see some change with that, but ultimately it did not make it through. And that was one of the other bills. The other ones that kind of surprised us was the trapping bills, which I believe it was House Bill 139 and 140, which one was education, the other was setbacks. The setbacks made it through, but then it never made it through committee, but then it never made it through the House. And the other one was the education, and that one did not make it through. And so we're hearing from some of the publics that they would like to see that as an interim topic. And like director said, whether or not the management council brings that one forward will remain to be seen, and we'll just stand by and wait for that list. So now that all these bills have been signed, we've got a tracking sheet. We're kind of keeping tabs on what actions we need to take next. So as the director mentioned, House Bill 5 was the fishing outfitters and guides. We've got a number of steps that we're following to make sure that that gets taken care of, and that we meet the intent and the requirements of the bill this year. And we also, the next steps for us, of course, is to watch what the interim topics are when they come out from the management council on April 8th. And then once those are posted, we'll be looking at the calendar, because the TRW will have their first meeting on April 30th. So be a really quick turnaround. Even though the legislative session is done, we'll be turning around and preparing our folks for the next round of testimony on the interim topics when we see the agenda come out. And then they'll have meetings throughout this year. There's 3 meetings scheduled right now. And I suspect that we'll see something from the ag committees as well, if if their interim topics relate to us. So we'll be prepared for those. And then we'll be good through this year. And then February 9th of next year is when the next session starts. So put it on your calendar. And I'll stand for any questions.
Madam President. Doug, thank you for that. And thanks to the whole team, the legislative team. You guys spent a lot of time on that, and it seemed like an excessive amount of bills this year that we were tracking and dealing with, and I thought the team did a really good job. And I mean, just the department wide was really good on that. And I guess I'm going to ask specifically because I know it most. SF2, which failed. And that was the weighted bonus points for sheep and moose. And my question is really going to talk about the non-resident side of that, because I think we do, no matter what, we heard a lot of things in testimony, but there is an issue, and not having a random chance for non-residents, I think, is there a way that we can look at, because there's 18 licenses, or, those, is there a way to pool them instead of going area by area? Is there a way that we can look at living inside the statute and still offer a random draw opportunity, even if it rotates from area to area? I'm just wondering if there's a way to do it, because right now there's just not an incentive for new people to put in as a non-resident, and that has an impact on us. And honestly, it's not fair. Like, that's my thought. And so I'd love to see or hear any kind of idea that we could get that part of that system when we went to 90-10 should have been changed at the same time. In my opinion, I understand the department does a really good job on neutrality, but I wasn't quite as neutral. Anyway, I'd like to see if there's any way we can look inside the statute and bring something to make that viable, because at this point, I have no idea if that statute will ever change.
Yes, Madam President and Commissioner Bell, thank you for the acknowledgement of our folks on that. It was a very challenging time for us, and a lot of all in 110% on a lot of the things we're working on. As you heard me mention at the testimony before TRW, that we modified one hunt area last year so the moose hunters would have that random opportunity, and it's pretty tough the way things are spelled out. But and Director Bruce and maybe some of Dan can chime in, but I think we can take a look from what's out there and what we can do. I know that the local managers were sensitive to it last year, and we wanted to maintain some random opportunity somewhere in the state. And I don't know, Dan, can you add to that as well? And thanks for coming up. You probably weren't ready to be coming up this early in the day for us, or the meeting. Thank you.
Madam President, Commissioners, I'm Dan Smith. I'm the Wildlife Division Chief Game Warden. We actually had our season setting meeting over the last 2 days internally. And I think that was about a 2-hour conversation trying to figure out how to meet the statute, which says it will be 90-10 split, and then trying to meet our regulation, which says, 25% of those are random draw. So basically you got to try to figure out how to get 40 licenses in an area so that there's 4 non-resident licenses, so that there's 1 random license. And so we did try rearranging things yesterday to try to make that fit and still fit the statute.
Madam President, I appreciate this. So so it has to be in one area. It can't pool that. I mean, you can't say if it's 90-10 statewide and there ends up being, a certain amount of non-resident licenses. Technically, you could have a random tag, but you can't have a random tag if you go by area. And so I'm trying to figure out a way, if there's a way in the statute to be able to do that. And this actually was a conversation I had with some legislators to see if there's a way I don't know whether they're going to talk about this in the interim. As you know, it's very complex, hard to understand. Anyway.
Madam President, Commissioner Bell, I agree, very complex. And so I think as we move forward, we'll need to be probably involving one more person at the podium who's probably sitting around here, but we'll get Ben's opinion as well on what he thinks. So thank you for your question.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you.
Before we move to the next agenda item, I'd like to recognize Representative Winter for being here with us today. Thank you, sir, for all that you do and for coming to the meeting today. So thank you. All right, Chief's gonna come back up.
Madam President, members of the commission, Director Bruce, Doug just threw off my whole timing, so. You know, as you all know, I'm pretty new to this position. And one of the most exciting things that I get to do right now is get to recognize people in the department who do great work. And there may be some highs and lows in this job, but this is a definite high. So I'm going to start off with an award. I'd like to have James Hobbs come up, please. Just wherever you're comfortable. We're going to try to make you uncomfortable. So James Hobbs is our 2024 Shakir Safari Wildlife Officer of the Year. This award is given annually in every state and every Canadian province by the Shakir Safari Club International, and it honors a wildlife officer whose efforts during the year display outstanding performance and achievement. Nominations come from within the department, so this is peers recognizing peers. Okay, so James this year was nominated by Brad Hovengay, and I read through the nomination. I was going to try to figure out how to summarize it for you, but I can't. So I'm going to force you to listen to the whole nomination. It's not that long, but please bear with me for a couple minutes. As a game warden in the Star Valley area, James represents and exemplifies a Wyoming game warden and the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. As a passionate wildlife manager and a relentless law enforcement officer and a true spokesman for both his community and his department, James is the pillar of the community and everything a Wyoming game warden should be. A 17-year veteran game warden of the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, James truly inspires fellow game wardens with his work ethic, his dedication to the wildlife resource, and relationship with his community. He takes pride in the management of wildlife resource and the consistent apprehension of wildlife violators in his area of responsibility, yet rarely seeks recognition for his efforts. James's hard work is evident to all that know and work with him. As I said, James is a skilled investigator and a relentless law enforcement officer in the pursuit of apprehending wildlife violators. Above and beyond that, he has an amazing ability to recognize when a situation warrants a heavy-handed approach to a chronic poacher or a lighter educational experience where the benefit of the doubt is given and a valuable learning experience takes place. This year, James put together an incredible residency case that led to the illegal taking and seizure of several trophy big game animals. The fines, restitution, and incarceration time were considerable penalties for this wanton wildlife violator and a career case for James. The Star Valley community is delighted with the results of this investigation, and as James's supervisor, Brad consistently receives positive comments about James from the individuals he has dealt with in law enforcement situations. James has had the distinction of being a Wyoming Range deer manager for nearly a decade. His passion for managing wildlife and serving the public is exemplified by his work with the Wyoming Range deer herd. During James's time in the Afton game warden position, his positive attitude toward the management of mule deer and his uncanny ability to successfully educate the public about the species has garnered an incredible amount of support for mule deer management efforts in the Wyoming Range. James has the amazing ability to deal with a diverse and complex community in Star Valley, and as a side note, a lot of snow. He is truly a professional in his ability to resolve wildlife conflicts without compromising his conviction to the wildlife resource. His skill and abilities in dealing with wildlife damage is unsurpassed, and his efforts are recognized by his peers and the landowners he assists. James Warden District has some of the most difficult to solve wildlife issues in the state. His extraordinary ability to make objective observations and apply realistic, common sense decisions to difficult management situations has proven to be an invaluable asset to the department. In conclusion, James is one of the finest individuals to have ever worn the Wyoming Game Warden badge. The tradition of the Wyoming Game Warden are sustained at the highest level of his work performance. James's integrity is unsurpassed in the eyes of the people he serves. and he has undeniably dedicated his professional life to the protection and conservation of all wildlife in the Afton Warden District. And I would like to go on to say that, a little bit about James. He's been a game warden since 2007, and I'm hoping I'm getting all these dates right. He'll correct me if I'm not. He served in Sheridan and in the Alpine regions and in Lovell, and then in 2016 went to Afton. And as a side note, I was the access coordinator in Cody when he was the game warden in Lovell, and his relationships with landowners made my job so much easier and so much better. So just really appreciated my time getting to work with him. Not only is he a stellar game warden, but he's a proud family man. So he has 7 kids. He's been married for 21 years, and he knows how to balance working for the department and having a family. And you should give him kudos for living in a warden station for that amount of time with 7 kids. He's so recognized by the landowners in the community that during this legislative session, Representative Erickson requested that he come to Cheyenne and be recognized on the House floor for receiving this award. And so he did that. And then the Senate didn't want to be outdone. So Senator Dockstetter also invited him over to the Senate side. And so he was recognized in both galleries of the legislature during this session. As the Wildlife Officer of the Year, he will attend NAWIA, which is going to be in Erie, Pennsylvania this year. It's an annual conference. NAWIA stands for the North American Wildlife Enforcement Officer Association. And so he'll be going to there in July. And he also, as winner of this award, he receives a $20,000 death benefit for his family. So
Hopefully not to be used.
not to be used in the near future, for sure. All right, if you'll bear with me just a minute. As part of this award, I'm going to give all this stuff to James. He does receive this beautiful plaque. I'm going to hand that to you for you to hold up, recognizing him for his Wildlife Officer of the Year. And in addition to that, he's going to need more space in his office. He also receives this beautiful pewter plate, which I have kept bound up because I didn't want to break it. Getting it to here. He also received this plate as part of the award. So I offer my congratulations to James on a job well done.
Thank you. Up there, maybe? Perfect, thank you.
I never wanted this much time in front of the commission, I can tell you that. All right, so the next award I'd like to do is I'd like to have Travis Crane come up. Seems like just yesterday, but Travis Crane has been with us for 20 years now. So I'm proud to recognize Travis for 20 years of service with the Game and Fish Department. Travis started in 2004 as a biologist technician in Cheyenne. He was then hired as a game warden, eventually assigned to the Lander region. After that, he became a district warden in KC in about 2008, and then finally saw the light and came to Cody in 2011. And he's been the North Cody game warden since that time. And just as a kind of side note, I was a little bit jealous when Travis came to Cody because I really wanted that job too. Thank goodness I didn't get it because Travis is definitely the guy that should have got that job. He does an astounding job. That's right. He did do that. He's an extremely dedicated employee who works tirelessly to protect Wyoming's wildlife resource. His district, the North Fork, is home to every big game species and trophy game species we have, and he manages all of that. He makes solid hunting recommendations in collaboration with the biologists every year. He manages or helps manage, or at least participates in the blue ribbon fishery that's the North Fork. He's got great relationships with all his sportsmen. They really never call the stop poaching line. They don't call the office. They call Travis directly. He shares his phone number with everybody, and the calls just all go directly to him. He's very efficient in his work. He goes above and beyond all the time, but he still maintains that work-life balance as well. Travis is an accomplished horseman. He's on the horse training committee. And honestly, he and I went to horse training together in 2008, which just seems like a lifetime ago, but it took for Travis, didn't take as well for me. So Travis had to train me quite a few times over the next several years to go horseback into the backcountry. And what I learned doing that is Travis's idea is, why ride a horse when you can walk? So just sharing a little personal story here. The very first time I went on a horse ride with Travis and Chief Osterlin back there, Travis took us up Blackwater to go retrieve a trail camera. And we rode all the way up there. It seemed great. I did ask that day if I should wear hiking boots or cowboy boots. And he's like, I don't care, you know. So we park our horses and Travis is like, well, the camera's way up here in the top of the pass. And all it was just looking straight up. I was wondering why we left our horses there, but we took off on the trail. Travis took off, up these switchbacks we go. Pretty soon, it was Travis at the top, Osterlin about in the middle, and I'm dragging behind because there's just no air where we were at. And I got a little farther up the trail. Pretty soon, I see Osterlin coming back down the trail. Don't see Travis, but we pointed to another mountain, and there's Travis going through the divide on the other side. And Travis actually beat us back to our horses. So it was a pretty sad deal. Had a similar experience in Eagle Creek with him as well. So Travis has actually outwalked my horse in one occasion. Travis's law enforcement effort is above compare. He is always out there. As noted before, he has a blue ribbon fishery, and it's tourist season in the summer. So basically you can drive up the road, check all the fishermen, and they'll all turn over. They'll drive down the road, check all the fishermen again, and they all turn over. So you could do that 24 hours a day, all summer long. But he stays on top of it. The anglers respect him, and violators are afraid of him. So in summary, he addresses his job duties very seriously, but he has a positive attitude, a polite demeanor, and he's great working with the public. And I just want to congratulate him on 20 years of service. So he does receive a plaque, but he also, after 20 years, gets a pin that has a ruby. Look closely, has a ruby in it. There you go. Let's stand up. Perfect. Thanks. Thanks for bearing with me.
Congratulations, gentlemen. Thank you for your service to the department and the state of Wyoming. We appreciate that.
All right, now I got it. It's supposed to be green. President Lundvall, Commissioners, Director Bruce, Alan Osterlin, Chief of Fisheries. It's my distinct pleasure to present 35 years of distinguished service to one of our division employees, Dean Follett. Dean, you want to come on up? You know, in today's day and age, having someone that works 35 years for the same outfit is quite an accomplishment. And Dean has, we started about the same time in Laramie, and so we go back a long ways. Dean started with the department in May 1989 as a fisheries technician and lander. He decided he didn't like the fisheries end of things, so he went over to be an elk feeder that winter. Decided he didn't like that, so he went over to the reservoir crew, working the wildlife division. And at that time in department history, which is just post Ice Age, and I can say that because we would have about the same amount of time, but the reservoir crew was an enforcement position. It was like a trainee, game warden trainee position, 2-member crew. So we worked for that, under that crew for a while. And then the opportunity in 1990, the fall of that year, Dean got the opportunity to put in for a fish culturist position at Como Bluff, and he was hired in that position. Como Bluffs was a hatchery just a little bit northeast of Medicine Bow that was decommissioned in 2010, 2004, 5. After leaving there, Dean went over to, well, actually, he went to Wigwam in 1992, transferred there as a culturist. Then he was promoted in 1998 at Como Bluff as a senior culturist position. In 2005, Dean lateraled over to Spies. And at that time, one of the things I'll mention is that Spies was going over through a major renovation project. And Dean played a key role in bringing that to fruition. And right now, even today, we have people coming from other agencies around the country to visit Spies to look at that facility because they want to mirror it, and because it is quite the facility. And then in 2014, Dean lateraled over to Clark, which is north of Cody here. It's the second largest facility after Spies in the culture program. And then Dean was promoted in 2019 as a superintendent there. If you ever have the opportunity, the Bighorn Basin has 4 hatcheries in it. And Clark is, like I mentioned up here at Clark, it's a beautiful facility and has been one of the gems within the culture program, and Dean certainly has kept it that way under his tenure. Dean is a department employee that looks for the most efficient way to get any project done. As a supervisor, Dean cares and listens to his employees, and he is a very dedicated and strong team player for the department. Most recently, and I could go through a whole list of Dean's accomplishments, but certainly he has been instrumental in assisting with the engineering design team and the recent AIS, Aquatic Invasive Species Effluent Project up there at Clark. And as I mentioned, his work in the renovation project of Spies is definitely leaving his mark in the culture system, which he'll continue to do for a long time. So with that, I'd like to congratulate Dean for 35 years of fantastic service within the department. And Travis, if you hang around long enough, you get a diamond in this lapel pin.
Madam President, Director Bruce, members of the commission. Next on your agenda item is your FY26 budget presentation. And Meredith Wood, our Chief Financial Officer, and Stephanie Crayley, our General Accounting Manager, will do this presentation. Meredith will have a few comments after I, and then Stephanie will do the bulk of it. Before I turn it over to them, I do want to just thank the subcommittee commission members, Commissioners Roberts, Masterson, and Bell, for sitting on the budget team. Appreciate all your guidance in that. And then really just a thanks to the field staff. This budget process is a year-long process, and the chiefs of every division and deputies of every division sit in a room with me for at least about a couple hours every month. From now, we'll start working on next year as soon as we get this one passed. And it is strenuous, but at the end of the day, I think you'll be happy with this budget. Folks have put a lot of effort into this. It is tight, I will tell you that. If you recall last year, we were in that 102, 103 original approved budget. And this year we're proposing to you a $100 million budget. So it's tight, but I think we can get there. And I just want to say thanks to all the work, especially from Meredith and Stephanie. They sat in the room and did all the spreadsheets and everything for all of us whenever we'd yell and scream and try to get to the end of the day. So With that, I will turn it over to Meredith.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon, President Lundenball, Commissioners, Director Bruce. As Eric mentioned, this is the preliminary approval review process for your commission's FY26 budget. What Stephanie's going to cover in the guts of the presentation is your standard budget and then the one-time project budget. And then request final approval of both so that we can start entering into contracts and agreements with an effective date of July 1. So what I'm going to talk about is what do we consider in advance of this entire process on an annual basis? And because the Game and Fish is self-funded essentially, and then also receives federal aid, we have to consider first, what can we afford to ensure that we have close to a balanced budget? So for FY26, through a lot of iterations of projections and considerations of different sources of revenue and expenditure projections, I anticipate at the end of that year, we will have just over 103 million in revenue for that 12-month period. So I'm going to go pretty slow on this slide. This is essentially the projections, and it's not something that I necessarily want to share with everyone because it's very much a crystal ball. And you have to understand that there is so much that has to come to fruition to get these numbers to where I have projected they may be in the next 18 months from now, that I promise you, these are not accurate, but they are as close as I can get. So again, projected revenue at the end of FY26, we're anticipating a little over 103 million. The standard budget that Stephanie will walk through the details in just a minute is just over 100 million. And then of that, our expenditures run between typically 92 and 95% of our total annual budget. So I've anticipated in that third line, how much of that 100 million will we actually expend? That comes out to that 95 million. The estimated one-time project list, which Stephanie will also go through the details on for 26, is proposed at just over 2.2. There are no new projects in there, so they're all projects continuing on in subsequent years that previous commissions have approved, just as a side note. So total estimated expenditures at the end of FY26, we're anticipating at just over 97 million. So the fund balance, your cash balance at the start of the fiscal year, we anticipate being 91.3 million. And then you, the commission, has a reserve that's invested in the pool A. That's set aside dollars. You have access to them, but they're less liquid than standard cash. In that account is just almost 47 million, which leaves funds available for distribution, the 44.5. Since FY25 is not over yet, we have to take into consideration where are we sitting right now with the budget, plus any adjustments that have occurred over the last several months for the period we're in currently, plus the revenue projection there. So at the end of FY25, which doesn't happen until June, I expect we will add $1 million essentially to the available cash for allocation. Again, going back to 26, which is 18 months from now, revenue compared to expenditures, which are those top numbers, the 103 less the 97, that would theoretically put just shy of 6 million also into your cash. Then we have to take into consideration, what do we already have committed? So for all the fiscal years prior, well, roughly 2 to 5 years back, what has the commission already approved in obligations that we haven't spent yet? That comes out to 23.4 million. So right off the top, we have to say, of the available cash, we have to leave set aside that 23 million. And then finally, less anticipated one-time projects. The big majority of that 16.2 is the Speeds hatchery construction at 15 million. And then there are some crossing dollars in there as well that the commission has essentially set aside but not approved for expenditure. So the bottom line at the end of FY 26, what does this whole thing mean? Best case scenario, because all these numbers on here are rather conservative from a projection standpoint, the commission would have potentially $11.8 million in discretionary funds, which is not, I mean, that's a great position to be in. The one thing I would suggest, and I think Eric kind of alluded to, was that doesn't mean that we're just cash happy and can distribute it to anything that we want whenever we want. One of the things for this FY 26 budget was we need to take a step back in some areas and do a reset. Capital construction and maintenance, we have a tremendous number of facilities and property and fences and enhancements and just standard maintenance that we have not typically reserved a budget for to ensure regular consistent maintenance on all those facilities. So that is very slim in your 26 budget. We're building a 10-year plan essentially for facilities going forward, and we'll have to build that back in. Another example is game warden houses and houses at hatcheries. Those are big ticket items, roughly $500,000 a piece. And we have for several years now done one of each per year. Neither of those will be in the presentation today. So again, at the end of FY 26, if all the stars align, and my guesses were close, roughly 11.8 million in that discretionary pot. But we do anticipate that that will need to go to required items. Plus, that's also the pot where if there are good, wonderful, once in a lifetime opportunities, that's where the money would have to come from to do that. So are there any questions on that slide? I know it's confusing.
Madam President, Mike, I have a question. Let's take the speech, the 16.24 million. What did the commission allocate for? I mean, I know we've spent some money on that already, and I'm trying to. Is the 16 million, refresh my memory, was it 16 million what we think it's going to be, or that's what we locked onto and we think it's going to be more now?
President Lenball, Commissioner Roberts, I may have Alan come and help me with this, but as far as what was approved so far, there was 17.2 million set aside. I'm sorry, 17.5 million set aside. 2.5 has been added to the budget and committed under contract for the design and engineering of the project, with the other 15 essentially set aside in holding, so that when we get those contract plans in place, we could contract those dollars. As far as the total project, I'll let Alan come and talk about that.
Madam President, Commissioner Roberts. So I'll be providing an update tomorrow. We'll get more in the weeds of it, but basically there was, you had the 15 million that were, as Meredith mentioned, that was set aside for construction, 2.5 that was set aside for engineering and construction oversight, and $1.5 million of that will be the engineering, which will be completed in June. So that'll be gone. And then that'll leave a chunk for the construction oversight and then the 15 million for the construction. And tomorrow during my presentation, I'll give you an update on, as you recall, back in September, I said I'd come back with the 50% design estimates, which is a more firm estimate how much the project's going to cost. And that's what I'll update you with tomorrow.
Are there any other questions at this point? Okay. So as you know, there is a commissioner subgroup that is specific to look at the budget. And during one of our meetings this year, we talked a lot about, well, what are the funds that we can do whatever we want with versus funds that are somewhat restricted. So we attempted this slide to kind of depict what it is it would cost the department to just do bare bones as we are right now with the same number of full-time employees and the same number of facilities. So the top portion of this slide shows for personnel, full-time employees, plus some of these other non-negotiable expenditures, that makes up about 60% of our total budget. And I'll just walk down through these. So the top line, like I mentioned, is that payroll piece for all full-time employees. The next one is for damage claims. In the FY '26 budget, we proposed $2 million in there. This is one area that you could potentially see us back asking for an increased appropriation on based on what happens with actual damage claims in FY '26, especially with some of the recent changes for elk. Statewide cost allocation. This is a bill that is provided to the department from the state budget office for the services provided to the department by other state agencies. So for example, the state auditor's office, the treasurer's office, human resources, enterprise technology services or ETS. And that is one where we are working to get some more information on, and that may go down slightly, but that would cover what the current invoice is. So that one's a non-negotiable as well. So THALEX, that's for the law enforcement communication hotline. That is in statute that we utilize that. Landowner coupons, I think you're all familiar with those. Those are on licenses, $16 reimbursement for every coupon turned into those landowners. And then game warden retirement, that is one that's in statute. It goes down every year. It was something added by the legislature, but it is mandatory. And then of course, utilities, the next ones pretty much are related to all of our facilities and equipment. So utilities and taxes. Taxes was a hot topic during the legislature this past year. So that is one that may slightly decrease as well, depending on what comes of all of those discussions. And then the insurance is the insurance premium that we have through the state risk management system. So that makes up, like I said, about 60% of our total budget, which leaves 40%, roughly 40 million to do everything else. And we attempted to list a rather comprehensive list, but I'm sure that there's stuff missing and everybody's probably already thinking of what those could be to do with that money. And that includes, AWAC employees. For example, our aquatic invasive species program is primarily made up of temporary seasonal personnel. And I think upwards of 60 people come in to help with that program. So all of them have to be funded out of that. All of the habitat surveys, all the habitat enhancement work, supplies, materials, everything else. All of our maintenance, acquisition of property, easements, vehicles, equipment, so on and so forth. And I'm not going to go through the whole laundry list, but I think it was one of the questions during that commissioner subgroup meeting led towards this. So we're just trying to paint a picture here. Are there any questions on that?
Madam President, Ms. Wood, on the damage claims, does that include crop damage as well as like livestock predation?
President Lundvall, Commissioner Haskell, yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so these are just some quick highlights, changes between the FY '25 budget and the FY '26 proposed budget, and then I'll turn it over to Stephanie. Some of the increases were in that statewide cost allocation category that I talked about. That's over $1 million. Historically, we paid for ETS and the HR portion only, and now we're being billed for all of those other agencies. So that was a significant increase. The third phase of the governor's and legislature's salary increase took into effect. So that was a good but mandatory change. And then some of the efficiencies and reductions that we made, we did spend a lot of time looking at efficiencies, trying to get that execution rate from that projection sheet, if you recall, closer to that 95% as best we could. And that this is a result of those things. So in the feed ground hay budget, there was a reduction of 550,000 roughly. In vehicles, this is one area where we made some pretty significant efficiency enhancement, I believe, to the processing of replacing vehicles, whereby we extended the minimum number of miles driven by several of our vehicle classes up to 130,000 miles, which also gets very much in line, well, closer in line with the state vehicle replacement policy. We're still, I believe theirs is 200,000, so we're still under that, but. And then CapCon and deferred maintenance, like I said, we're kind of doing a reset year this year in 26, or proposing to do one. Last year, Casper and Jackson regional offices had quite a number of projects in there for CapCon and deferred maintenance. And until we get that 10-year plan more finalized, this is a bit of a reset. Payable grants, this is primarily two categories. One for sage grouse local working groups, decrease the amount of funds available for those grants, as well as the UW Game and Fish Fellowship Program. We've done some review and evaluation of that, and it's kind of a reset on how that program is going to be administered between the two agencies. Landowner coupons, unfortunately, we've seen a continuous trend in landowner coupons. They are just not coming in like they had in historical previous years. So we made an adjustment there. And then contractual services, likely as a result of the decrease in CapCon and deferred maintenance. That was just a carryover relationships sort of thing. So if there's no questions for me, I will turn it over to Stephanie.
Madam President, Meredith, thank you so much for your work on this, and Eric and everybody on your team. You do great work, and your institutional memory is priceless. Thank you for all this. Two questions. Who maintains our vehicles?
President Lemwell, Commissioner Masterson, it is the agency's responsibility to maintain our fleet. So every employee who is assigned a vehicle, it is their responsibility, and we have it in the internal vehicle policy that they have those, that is their job.
Okay, so we're using whatever service, I don't mean to make it sound like I'm belittling it, but whatever service the individual needs, they'll, within that policy, get it serviced locally or wherever.
President Lemwell, Commissioner Masterson, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is there a, you made a comment about a state mileage requirement. Can you comment on that? Does the other state agencies have different mileage requirements, or is there one blanket and we're an exception?
President Lemwell, Commissioner Masterson, I can't speak to all of the different agencies. State Motor Pool under the Department of Administration and Information is the, by statute, entity responsible for all vehicles owned by state government. I don't know about YDOT, however, and their policy is 200,000 for most vehicle types. Obviously, game and fish vehicles are used slightly different than I would say the majority of other state vehicles. So we have been rather conservative on making sure that those vehicles are replaced so that they can meet the needs of our employees and the jobs. However, you may recall at the January meeting, we added several $100,000 to your current FY25 budget so we could get caught up on vehicle acquisitions over the last 2 years. And I think because we kept several vehicles 2 years beyond when they would have been replaced, we thought at the time, extending those mileage replacement minimums would have detrimental effects on maintenance costs and other costs and resale value costs, and that just wasn't the case. So making some of these mileage adjustments in these classes.
Madam President, I might just want to, and I think maybe Eric, if this might be more directed toward you, but I would like to go over the decrease on the feed grounds, because I'm sure that's going to be an issue that's going to come up. And I just wanted to assure people, the reason for that decrease is nothing more than just what Eric will explain. It has nothing to do with closure of feed grounds. It has nothing to do with thing. We have no intentions of doing any of that. We just want, it's a matter of budgeting, and we'll always have the money for those feed grounds. But I want Eric to address that if he would, please.
Sure, Madam President, Commissioner Roberts, thank you for the question. And yeah, it's not a matter of anything other than looking at historical data and also understanding kind of where we've been in the past. You know, years ago, that budget was around 700,000. And then we've slightly bumped that up over the years to fill the hay banks to ensure we had enough hay to feed in really bad winter times. So after doing that for multiple years, and being in the spot we're in with how our winters have been the last couple of years, we felt like now was a good time to maybe just make a slight reduction there, but also know that we could come back if we have a severe winter next year and have to add to the budget for that. But I think right now we're looking okay.
Thank you. I just didn't want that to spread like wildfire or anything where people thinking that, because it seems to be on the press lately. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, if no further questions for me, I will pass this to Stephanie Crawley.
I have one question, Madam President, Ms. Wood. On the very first pie chart there, you showed that 61% of revenue is from licenses. I'm sure it exists, but is there a breakdown of resident versus non-resident to make that up? Do you have that available?
Yeah, President Lundwall, Commissioner Haskell, I don't have it with me right today, but we definitely have it.
Okay, thank
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Good afternoon. President Lundvall, Commissioners, Director Bruce. I'm going to walk you through the remainder of our FY26 budget. Sorry, Stephanie Crawley, General Accounting Manager. So this pie chart makes up 7 different sections that we separate our budgets into. I'll go over 6 of them in more detail. I'm going to touch on that top one that grants $6 million first. We have to have a pot of money to pay receivable grants. So this set of money is for receivable grants that the department needs authority from the commission to spend, and then we get reimbursed for that on the back end. So that money is just in there. It's really just a technicality to have that money set aside so that we have it to spend and then get reimbursed. And then I'll go through the next set of slides and go into these divisions in a little more detail. I'm going to skip this slide. You're going to see it again towards the end. It may make a little bit more sense at the end, so I'm just going to skip it for now, and I'll touch on it again at the end of this presentation. Okay, so the first one we're going to go over is administration. This is our director's office. It covers our directors, our deputies, your commission dollars, vehicles, our HR training, and our statewide habitat protection program. Some notable increases or decreases in the budget here. The main one that Meredith talked about, the vehicles, were down 2.1 million there. The other big change was the director's office decreasing their contingency fund by $50,000. In total, down just under 30% in the director's office budget. The next one is our commission and educations division. This covers our website, our publications, our magazine, Hunter's Ed, camps, and administration. 2 big notable decreases in the budget there. The 1E40 conservation education, that is where we decreased the fellowship program. And 1J60, the information and education budget, we decreased more of just the inefficiencies. And then we had one position that we moved it in the budget to more align with where it sits. And so it showed a negative here and a positive in another unit. So overall, communications and education down 6.2%. Fiscal division, this covers all accounting, our licensing sections, our customer service phone center, and our regional office managers. Notable changes for the fiscal division, 2J50, our mailroom. We noticed there was a large area of improvement needed in purchasing envelopes and postage. Kind of had quite a stock there, so we're in an effort to be more efficient. We're taking a break there, so that's where you see that decrease. We're not eliminating sending stuff out, just we have plenty of stock. And then down at the bottom, that 2X10, that's our legislative expenses. Those are the ones Meredith covered. They include our damage payments, landowner coupons, SALEX, statewide cost allocation, and our retirement insurance. The greatest increase coming from that statewide cost allocation. Services division is down 2%. This covers all of our habitat and access crews, 100% of our ITS and GIS teams, supportive facilities for the regional offices, our game and fish lab, and lands and administration. Notable changes here. Eric just spoke on this, that 4D19 for feed ground. Or in the hay sheds, we're not going to replace, historically we've replaced a hay shed per year. We've decided that in an effort to take that pause on CapCon and reevaluate how we're going to move forward, we're not replacing a hay shed this year. So that's where you see the $206,000 decrease in our budget. 4H19 and 4ZXX, both of those were attributed to the large maintenance and capital construction contracts that we had in the Casper and the regional office projects. Those were very big projects and they spanned a couple years. We're now done with those. And again, in an effort to pause and reevaluate, we're not doing any large CapCon projects this year. So that's where you see those large decreases in those budgets. And then the last one I wanted to touch on, that 4Y10 information technology. Back in COVID, we received quite a bit of CARES Act laptops. Those are all now becoming outdated. We need to replace those. IT is pretty expensive now. So we're in an effort, we're catching back up. The other big increase in that one is we are currently operating under a contract with Microsoft Office that is not going to be supported longer. So we need to do a renewal of our Microsoft Office to get that up to date where we have something that's supported. Fish division. Fish covers our AIS, Aquatic Invasive Species Program, aquatic habitat, and our 10 hatcheries and rearing stations. Notable changes here, 5C19, $500,000 down. Again, as we're looking at CapCon, we're not going to replace a house in the fish division this year and then reevaluate for next year. 5Q1B, you'll notice it's got quite a bit of a decrease there. Our AIS division does a really great job of seeking out alternative grant funding. We currently have a pending $1 million to cover AIS projects. So we have removed our budget for that in anticipation of receiving those funds. And the last thing I'll touch on this is 5Q30. So our statewide aquatic management, we had a reduction of a temporary employee and the expenses that go along with that employee, and that is the loss that you see there. And down 3.6% in the fish division. The wildlife division, this is going to be a two-part slide. They have so much, we can't fit it all on one. Overall, they are down 3.8%. Notable changes in the wildlife division, 6A10, so in the wildlife administration, we did a large cleanup in this area for efficiency purposes and saw that we had data service fees for the callers in this division, and we moved that. So you'll see this later on the next slide, the increase on a different budget to cover those losses here. 6B19, bird farm. We are on phase 2 of the Downer Bird Farm project, and phase 2 is cheaper than phase 1. So that's where that decrease there is coming from. 6010 feed grounds. Again, we did a $500,000 decrease in hay on the feed grounds. 6L19, the vet labs, there's an increase there. And they're we're going to do a roof remodel at the Sabile Research Center. So that will cover that construction there. And then 6N1X, the special enforcement, there's a decrease there. And we're going to purchase some equipment and we're going to utilize restitution funds. So we've removed it from the budget this year. This may be a one-year deal where we use restitution until we can build that up again, but we have enough that we're going to cover some equipment there. So that's the decrease. In part 2 of wildlife. So we made some changes to our budget structure. All the regions had separate budgets for their supervisors, game wardens, and we have now combined those buckets. So the supervisors are now in one bucket, game wardens in another, and biologists in another bucket. So we have a big bucket of money and then we are able to disperse it out to them, but it kind of helps with some efficiencies on the accounting side. So that's why those, if you recall them from last year being separated, they're not separated anymore. They're all in one bucket. Both of those had increases related to those payroll increases that we had this last fiscal year. 6T4B sage grouse, the sage grouse group, working group has decreased their funding. So we decreased that by $250,000. And the last one I will talk on is 6T50, the state wildlife and habitat management. Again, there was some increased centralized data fees. Those are for those collars that I talked about on the prior slide. So this is where you see the increase go back up to cover those. Here's the slide I said you would see again at the end that I had at the beginning. So what we do is we have 5 buckets of funds for our funds. I talked about the reimbursable grants, that last one, so I'll talk about the other 4. The M&O budget is our operating funds. So this is everything we use to operate falls under here. Access fund, this is made up of our conservation stamp dollars and the donations, and those are earmarked specifically for access projects. Trust fund is our interest that we earned off of our trust fund and our inviolate corpus. And this is approved by the commission approves the funds. Typically or historically, we have used those for habitat, conservation and education projects. And lastly, state wildlife grants. This is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Grant Fund for sensitive species. And this is reimbursed at a 65-35 rate. So in summary, our budget comes out to $100,117,860. And we're sitting currently at somebody has to donate. We were sitting at a negative 3.5% decrease from FY25. Are there any questions on the standard budget before I head to one time?
Thank you, Madam President. I was waiting for Vice President Jolovich to assess Representative Winter's $50 fine. Actually, I do have 2 questions.
Sure.
John, I was gonna wait till she was finished.
Oh, okay. All right. Just checking. There's that Fishing Guide Advisory Board. Is that baked into this? I know that it's very nebulous right now, but is it somewhere in there or an estimate of what it will cost?
I'm gonna phone a friend.
Okay.
President Lovell, Commissioner Masterson, a component of it is the piece for the advisory board is in there. The long-term or maybe ongoing cost for stamps and programming and other equipment is not yet in there. There may be, after some additional evaluation, a change in that between now and July.
All right. Do you recall what amount we've set aside for funding the advisory board?
I believe it's 36,000. Is that right, Alan?
Just approximately.
36,000.
Okay, thank you. The second question is, item 6R30 is property rights, regional PW. Can you tell me what that is?
President Level, Commissioner Masterson, PLPW is access, yes, and that is outdated. We should probably remove it, but we recycle these charts sometimes, so I apologize for that. But that is the access, yes. Yeah.
Any other questions before I head to one-time budget? Okay. Hey, as Meredith said, we don't have any new one-time budget requests, so I will go over some previously approved projects here. We have 3 currently. The Mule Deer Focal Herd project was approved in a prior year for multiple year funding, and we're in year 4 of 5 of that for just a little over 1.5. Invasive grasses is in its 4th year. FY27 is undecided, so that's why I don't have out of however many years. And then we have Bear River Divide easement, which was also approved in a prior year for 5 years, and we're in the 4th year of that. In total, that makes up 2.2 million for our one-time projects. Any questions there? Okay, so I am here to request that the commission approve our standard budget of 100,117,860, our one-time projects budget of 2,221,625 for a total budget of 102,339,485. And I would also like to request authorization to enter into grant and contract agreements effective July 1, 2025.
Okay, thank you, ladies. Gentlemen, we have a request on the table. Do we have a motion?
Madam President, so moved.
Second.
Yeah.
All right, any debate or discussion, questions from anyone?
Madam President, this is preliminary. We will
This is
approve
the
that
preliminary.
final budget in June? July.
Yep.
July. Okay.
All right. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Madam President, if I could have a moment.
Of course.
I heard a cell phone go off. And we're gonna give you a pass on that one since you weren't here at the start of the meeting. Normally it'd be $50 to the wildlife fund, but we're gonna let you slide.
And Madam President, anytime we can get $50 out of legislature, I'm really excited.
Oh, goodness.
We'll be calling you more.
All right, yep.
There, Madam President, members of the commission, Director Bruce. Hello, welcome to our new commissioners and online. My name is Dan Thompson. I'm with the Large Carnivore Section. This is our annual spin around the sun, I guess, that we give an update to the commission and to the public, just kind of about some of the highlights and lowlights over the past year, I guess. There's never much dullness when it comes to these animals and the public interest. And so this is kind of our chance to talk about some of the work we do within our section on these species. And I will be introducing, there's a clicker. So we break this up. I'll start and I'll talk about some of the monitoring work we do. And then Brian DeBolt, our conflict coordinator, will cover conflict activities and management that we do in conservation with large carnivores. And then we're fortunate enough to have our Bearwise coordinator based out of Cody. And he is going to talk about some of our Bearwise activities that we did, and then I'll wrap it up with any questions at the end. So the role of Wyoming Game and Fish and our section is somewhat unique. We're a work unit, a statewide work unit. And I do apologize for, this is directed at some of the new commissioners, so there's some repetitiveness for the former commissioners. Masterson, you might need that anyway. I'm not sure, but sorry. He's been already messing with me today, so I have to. Most of you have seen this before. Much like other species, our goal is to maintain viable populations on the landscape. But with these animals, there are also damage issues and working on to manage and mitigate conflict. There's a lot of public interest and a public scrutiny and public desires that we use to form our conservation. And then that information education, which is the foundation. Two of these are very important. These are all very important, but most recently, and it was brought up during the legislative update, there was some bills that were proposed to kind of limit some of the abilities of the game and fish and your role in wildlife management. And those were specific, they were already mentioned, but the grizzly bear coupon and mountain lion bill that, again, there were intentions behind these. The people were very passionate about the wildlife and frustrated with certain things that happened, but we heard a lot from our public to defend what we do as an agency. And so, you know, we have people stationed in 4 regions in Northwest Wyoming, and certain people have different roles. We're all very much a team, though. You know, it's about connecting the dots and bringing things together. You know, what we know about conflicts and how we manage conflicts informs how we conserve and manage those species on the ground. Obviously, with these animals that have the potential to inflict direct and indirect impacts to humans, there's a lot of interactions between humans and these animals that are important. Competition and adaptation. These animals eat things, right? And there's a lot of interest in those prey species as well in our state. So, and again, you'll hear all of this, but most importantly, we're a team within a team. We're kind of more of a family, dysfunctional at times, I guess, in our section, but it works to do well for the wildlife, for the public. A little delay. And so for monitoring, primarily, we evaluate trend for mountain lions and black bears. It's very different than going out and doing line transects for pronghorn or flying elk surveys. It's not as compatible with that. We do have methods we use, but a primary method that we do evaluate, especially for mountain lions and for black bears, is looking at harvest trend and sex and age distribution of those localized populations. Obviously, wolves and grizzly bears are more intensive because of previous or current listing status. And again, these animals are based on their ecology, their life history, and it's different than ungulates because they're different than ungulates, and that's okay. So we'll start with mountain lions. Mountain lions, we set hunting seasons on a 3-year cycle. There's a little bit more on lions today because we will be talking about these in the near future. We will be setting those seasons this spring and bringing them back to you in July in Evanston or centrally or wherever that is decided. I live in Lander, so just saying. But so mountain lions are the most difficult to enumerate. We've looked at multiple methods and we have different tools that we can use localized to get an idea of abundance or density. But on a statewide level, the amount of work and money it would take to actually enumerate on a statewide level would not be logistically feasible. There's very much a heightened interest in mountain lions and their prey species. I think we've heard that for many years now, and it kind of ebbs and flows, but there's always interest in that. And there's a lot of questions that come up. You know, when we increase harvest in an area, people say, well, I'm still seeing tracks. That makes sense. If you remove animals, other animals are going to move in, and those younger animals actually move more. So it actually has the illusion of more animals. But all these things are things that we talk about with the public and try to help them better understand, because we're still learning too. You know, we have a lot more interest with the more recently formed Wyoming Houndsman Association. That's been very involved, and you will hear from them. We're seeing an increased interest in mountain lion hunting as a sport. And so we're also pretty proud of the work that we're doing for research and monitoring. Right now, Justin Clapp is a large carnivore biologist for us, but he's also working on his PhD through University of Wyoming. He's presenting today at the Mountain Lion Workshop in Albuquerque. Some of the primary impetus for this work was to assess the role of predation in relation to CWD in Bates Hole area around Casper. I think you've heard me talk about that, and I don't want to talk about those final results because they're still pending, but we're pretty excited about that. Some of the ancillary benefits from this work has been very interesting. This human disturbance as it relates to mountain lion behavior and scavenging in relation to disease. And so there's a litany of agenda-driven peer-reviewed literature out there that talks about the negative impacts humans have on mountain lions and humans as super predators and all these interesting adjectives that they use to basically, it's not so much in the Wyoming community, it's more southwestern part of the United States toward the ocean, where a lot of these are from. But they've done some different things that are interesting that basically, I think, limit what the true adaptability of these animals is. And so we were able to assess this by going in on these kills and seeing what happens with those mountain lions. And so this research is suggesting that mountain lions abandon their kills more than 50% of the time, or that they're killing more because of human disturbance or of hearing sounds played and things like that. What we found with empirical data is the opposite is true. And I think if you ask any houndsman or houndswoman or person that's worked with lions for a long time, we know this. If you kick a lion off a kill, it's going to come back. But we have empirical data now to demonstrate that. That was actually presented yesterday at the Mountain Lion Workshop. And a lot of people were very interested in it to have some data to support that. So basically the mountain lions just sit there and watch you very closely, or they leave and come back. And
Madam President. Hey. Thank you, Dan. I'm curious how your observations that the opposite is true. It looks as though at least one of these articles would appear to be a peer-reviewed study. So how do you reconcile those two things?
well, I'm not going to, sorry, Madam President, Commissioner Masterson. There are some flaws in the peer review process. There are some favoritism depending on the authors. And I'm not knocking those other research projects. They were done specifically for a certain thing. Some of them were playing sounds of people or dogs, and then if a lion left, it was alluding to different things. This study, we were physically going in on mountain lion kills from collared mountain lions. And our goal was to try to obtain a CWD sample, which we were very successful at, but we knew we were bumping cats off of kills. We had the collared animal data. We had our personnel going in on those kills so we could match those up and then look what happened after the fact. So the study design was more to answer that question from that direct standpoint, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then this was actually something that was an observation by retiree Hank Edwards and I believe Deputy Chief Martin Hicks and Lee Knox were this differential scavenging of CWD positive deer. And while this isn't specific to mountain lions, it was something that we ended up doing and talking with vet services, and a very intriguing thing that we're still learning about. But in essence, we would have an animal, a mule deer that tested positive and one that tested negative, and we'd put them out within sight of each other, 15, 20 yards from each other in the same spot. And then we would go in 20-day increments and weigh the difference in scavenging. And it was we're still learning about this, but the results are pretty fascinating. It's not always, it seems to be a little more in the winter, but there's definitely some differential scavenging that we're seeing between CWD positive and negative. And we know that when an animal consumes, at least a felid, a cat, 96% of the prion is destroyed during the digestive process. Sorry about that. But again, that's been a question, and this is just a very unique thing that it's kind of an interesting side benefit to this work. In the Wyoming range, again, this is this was a little different. This was not a research objective or a monitoring objective by the Game and Fish, but the long-term study in the Wyoming range at the University of Wyoming wanted to add a mountain lion component, mainly look at relationships to migration. And so we were very successful in getting cats on the air. We currently have 9 on the air. And based on our collared animal movements, you know, again, you'll remember those that were here in the past, we really bumped up those limits in the Wyoming range for a temporary time period because of the bad winter. I won't use the term that I get in trouble for using, but before the bad winter. And so we definitely have seen a reduction based on our collared animals and also just looking for tracks on the ground. And just to walk you through a little bit what we'll look at, because you're going to be hearing more about this in upcoming season setting meetings and then at the July commission meeting. So we'll look at annually. So in the next month, we'll be evaluating every hunt area, every mountain lion management unit. And this is just an example. This is hunt area 15, which is has been unlimited since 2010. And you see that big spike. I can't show you the spike on that side. Obviously, you see we had really high harvest. Then we look at that sex and age composition of harvest, which is kind of applicable to what's on the ground. And then if you look at a statewide level, you see a nice mixture. More adults on the landscape is a benefit for hunters, but also a benefit for the type of prey they're eating, depending on what you're looking at. And I think it's very important to realize that it's much more intricate than just, we know mountain lions eat deer. And that's part of how we manage and conserve both species, but it's killing a mountain lion doesn't save all the deer and vice versa. Well, obviously not vice versa. If you got rid of all the mountain lions, it'd be in trouble for all the deer, it would be trouble for mountain lions. But what we're seeing as we do these different studies across the state is it's different where you go. The different proportions of elk in the diet, depending on the age structure. In Southwest Wyoming, we saw a lot of coyotes in the diet. And then some of you have seen this slide before. This is why we talk about these things, because it's much more nuanced. In a younger age structure, you have more deer killers in that population. Older age structure, you have more elk killers in the population. So that factors into some of these discussions we'll be having in the future when we set those limits.
Madam President, I'm sorry, Dan. May I? Dan, the 2 slides previous to that, you had a statewide age sex composition. Since we're analyzing trends and it looked like, as I understood you, based on mortality. So that graph, statewide age sex composition, that's based on mortality.
That is of harvest, correct.
Okay. Does the fact that you have a subadult male, does it make it more vulnerable to being taken than a adult male? Is there any, well, never, I guess I'm trying to figure out if you weigh those things equally. I guess you do what you can, I guess.
Yeah, Madam President, Mr. Masterson, yes, that's all. I mean, there's a lot more to it. And we look at the per unit area of mortality based on mountain lion habitat, and it's based on that susceptibility to harvest. Yes, subadult males lay the most tracks. Adult males lay more tracks than adult females, but that is all factored into our management plan. And then we actually look at proportion of adult females in the harvest, the age of those animals, and all those other things come into play as well. But
Madam President, Dr. Thompson, in the slide before that with the makeup of, yes, that one of mountain lions diet, I think it says 50.1% is deer. I'm assuming that means whitetail and mule deer combined?
correct. And neonate, fawn, and adults.
Okay, and I know under the Wyoming Game and Fish Department that deer does classify those 2 species. Do you ever study that and break that down between the 2 species of deer, mule deer and whitetail?
No, that's sorry, Madam President, Commissioner Haskell. That is not something we've done primarily because of the areas we're working are hasn't been much for whitetail available, but in your country, yes, there's definitely a different scenario going on there. That's not something we've studied. I know On the Black Hills, the South Dakota side, they've looked at that, but it's a much higher whitetail component over there. But that is a very interesting question. The areas we've had were not conducive to that answer, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
We
Madam
haven't even got
President,
through lions yet.
if I might, Doctor. Bighorn sheep. It's not showing anything on the graph, which I'm assuming is probably, how would you ever get a number for bighorn sheep on what their take is?
Well, and that's why it doesn't show up there. It was one of the categories, but it wasn't part of the predation. It happens, and there are sorry, Madam President, Commissioner Roberts, it does happen, and there's definitely been some work in Southwest and desert bighorn sheep populations where an animal will become specialized at killing desert bighorn sheep. And so we've just never seen that. We did have some predation in the Seminoles when, well, actually when Justin was doing his master's. And so it does occur, but it's pretty rare. And quite honestly, if we had a specialist that started going to work on bighorn sheep, we would have the ability to remove that individual if that was an issue.
Madam President, I would just think it would be incredibly hard to gauge that, isn't it? I mean, you're dealing with a species that's pretty, usually for the most part, really remote with a very, like a, mountain lion that's very secretive. I mean, two combinations would be a little tough to figure it out. I'm just curious. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, if they overlap, there's that potential. And again, this is based on collared animals going to clusters of locations to see what they killed. Okay, that's where I was at. So again, just wrapping up mountain lions, we realize the people are very interested in these predator prey dynamics, and it's very unique. I feel fortunate in Wyoming to have intact large carnivore guild, intact ungulate guild, and we're still learning, right? Some of this, again, in Commissioner Haskell's country, mountain lions didn't exist not that long ago and grew to one of the highest densities in Western Hemisphere. So it's still something we're always learning about, and we understand that public interest in it. And again, we're evaluating that. And again, it was brought up. I think there was a lot of good work and a lot of good discussions with legislators and the public to have some of these things that come up and to shine a light on the work that's being done in Wyoming. A little less on black bears. We'll be talking about those next December. But again, like mountain lions, we're seeing increased interest in black bear hunting and viewing opportunity. The American Bear Foundation has been very active. It was based here in Cody and started here. And again, we're seeing more interest in hunting, and we had a record harvest this past year. It's primarily resident hunters. Most of those bears are taken over bait. But again, as we do with mountain lions, we look at that sex and age structure of harvest and the proportions and the ages of those animals. Now, we do have a little more tools when it comes to black bears. Oh, I forgot, there's a little video if you want to click on that, Wayne. Just to show, every once in a while we throw up a gratuitous cute video. Just a couple young pranksters here. But again, part of the reason and interest in our Wyoming black bears is these unique color phases. This is in the same litter, I would presume, but a very, very cinnamon versus a very blonde bear. And we'll see that. And I think that's a very interest to our public and to our hunters in Wyoming. And so the additional tool we have with black bears is we're able to go to certain areas and estimate density of the population using this non-invasive hair snare technique. So these grids you see, this is in the Wyoming range. This was our first revisit. This was the first place we did this several years ago in 2015. Because of the interest and things going on in the Wyoming range, we decided to go back last year. And so we hope to have a new density estimate for that area for the next season setting next December. It'll be really interesting to see. That's an area we've had very high harvest with the goal to have lower populations despite really good bear habitat. And so that'll be interesting to see that change through time or if it kind of stayed where it was at. And then again, trying to inform management with research. Emily Davis in the past year defended her master's thesis. She's currently doing a PhD project in Teton National Park. We won't hold that against her, but no, she's this work was actually, again, to look at some of these things that we proposed for the management plan were based on empirical data, but some of it also was speculation, right? This research was able to basically demonstrate that the way we're managing or evaluating these populations is working on the ground. And then I thought it came up again in legislative testimony and elsewhere, the issue of black bears and predation. We do know certain areas, depending on black bear densities, that they can be substantial neonate predators. In areas in the Sierra Nevadas and California, it's definitely an issue. But what we've seen in Wyoming, and it's been documented, this first study was in the 80s when the deer war started, quite honestly. The primary food that they're eating is vegetation. And then the Wyoming range research that I referenced earlier, very long-term data set. While we know black bears will take those mule deer neonates on occasion, it's not contributing to any type of population declines. And it's nice to have that data when people bring up things, gobbling up like popcorn, things like that. But one thing that we did last year that was somewhat of an arduous task during, but was really fun to be part of and afterwards, was hosting a Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies black bear workshop in Jackson. It is hard to make a profit hosting a workshop in Jackson, but it was very fun. We were proud to be able to bring in over 100 bear biologists, managers, researchers, and advocates from across North America. This was the first time we had representatives from Mexico. We had 6 biologists from Mexico that came up. They're up there on your left, I guess, learning how to use bear spray. It was a pretty neat chance to talk about what we do and talk with some other bear managers. And again, as with Lions, following up, this will be the 3rd year of that 3-year cycle. So we'll be looking at our data and bringing those proposed changes to you next January. Actually, we'll be talking about them in December, and we'll bring them to you in January. So wolves, I'll talk a little less about wolves, not because there's not interest, but because you'll be hearing about wolves more in depth from Ken Mills coming up in July. You know, we have a very intensive wolf monitoring program, which is, I think, important to be able to talk to people about what's going on with these animals. 23 years in a row that we've exceeded all the criteria. And again, we developed those harvest regulations, which you will get walked through in the future. And it's kind of fun to watch the information, how it's portrayed. We did harvest 34 wolves in that trophy game area of Northwest Wyoming last year. We captured, that's actually outdated. We've captured several more since then, since this was published. But we do try to maintain at least a collar or 2 in each pack in Northwest Wyoming that has multiple benefits. This was supposed to be an animation, but I was going to make a joke about even taking vagrants off the street to help with this work. We're fortunate enough to have a couple commissioners help us out. I shouldn't do this because he's going to kill me in questions. I know that. But no, I mean, it really is beneficial.
It's very difficult, Madam President, when they look at you and go, would you hold this wolf?
No, but I think it's a unique opportunity, and I invite other commissioners to get as involved with all the things that we do as possible. It's a great chance to see some of this on the ground action going.
Madam President, I can't underscore that enough. It's fascinating to see what they do and how they do it. And I really appreciate Ken inviting me, because sometimes the bear people just won't call you.
You got some bear people in the room that might not like that. I don't know. And so just talk about population status. Of course, we're required to maintain above 100. We managed for 160. Last year, we were above objective. It was an increased year of reproduction and low mortality. We are running those numbers this year, but we will be back toward right close to that 160 objective for this coming year. And I think what's important is when we manage our population to reduce the level of depredation, to reduce the level of wolves we have to kill in depredation, and to maintain those pack dynamics in the landscape. And that's where that 160 really seems to be a sweet spot for managing that population. And again, it does cost money and it's work, but it's really beneficial when people come to us with questions as to what's going on with these populations. It's very polarized when it comes to wolves. And so it's beneficial to have that data in hand for, I guess, the lovers and the haters, if you want to say that, and everyone in between. We have a lot of interest in wolves in surrounding areas. There's different management strategies in surrounding states. A lot of interest from Colorado, of course, with that reintroduction project coming on. But again, we work with our sister states and sister agencies. And the tedious nature of monitoring the information we have is very beneficial when Cowboy State Daily calls you on a daily basis and asks questions and things like that to be able to actually address some of the misconceptions out there. And it does provide insight. This was actually featured on the cover of last year's annual wolf report. This is 1152F, so we differentiate males and females. This female died of natural causes in the Klondike Hill pack. The breeding male, she was 9 years old. No, 7 years old, which is old for a wolf. The male was killed by another wolf in a newly forming Water Dog Lakes pack. And the pups in an unmarked subadult from her old pack were adopted by that forming Water Dog Lakes pack. Those are not things I know, but those are things our biologists know because of how closely they track these animals. And like Phil Quick and Scott Stingley sit here in the room, anybody in the Cody area needs to know anything about wolves, they go to them and they can answer it. And that's pretty impressive. I'm getting there, Brian, sorry. I'll end with grizzly bear monitoring. There's always a lot of interest in grizzly bears. Again, it's very important that we maintain a representative sample of these animals to know what's going on with the population. Last year was a very productive capture year. We caught, in 2 areas, caught 23 individuals and 25 captures, and a very diverse array of individuals in both those areas. We caught a cub of the year, 3 yearlings, and I think 10 subadults, 15 adults. Pretty good breakdown of males and females. Again, all that information that wasn't the right numbers. I realized that didn't add up. I didn't want to look at my journal. One cub of the year, 3 yearlings, 5 subadults, and 14 adults. We captured 6 independent age females. It's really important to monitor that female segment of the population. But again, all that information is important to allow us to track what's going on with the population. And the other ways we do that is through observation flights. We have a unique situation with bears on moth sites. Those little circles of dots are bears feeding on moth sites in those high alpine slopes. We track females with cubs of the year. They're an input to the model. And then, of course, we look that bear. You can see the collar on it. That bear was killed by another bear a long time ago. That's an old picture. But that known fate survival, all those are inputs into this new integrated population model. And there's also things, we get called a lot of things, but we also do a lot of science. And we're just recently submitted this paper looking at some of the descriptive statistics regarding grizzly bears' use of these moth sites, which is pretty unique and a neat occurrence in this country too. So all this information and more feeds into what we call this integrated population model. We use these models for other species as well. A lot of our ungulate herds are now managed with IPM. But this is also the foundation for how we see the future for conservation of grizzly bears. That is the population abundance through time. Again, remember 500 was the minimum recovery criteria to maintain genetic and reproductive output for the population. We've been above that for a long time. Everybody knows that. 2000, we started seeing some density dependent impacts, especially in the core of the ecosystem. The change point analysis, so when that really started, you can see the trajectory of the population there in 2006, 2007 is when we started to see basically bears are saturating some of those areas. There's still open areas at that time, so they were still expanding. But you can't expand forever within a certain area. And we've seen decreases in home range and things like that. You'll remember that bears were delisted in 2007. Because of that same time the trajectory changed, they were relisted because of an inadequacy to analyze white bark pine, which is a food source for them. That resulted in a very in-depth analysis of those foods, to demonstrate it was not an issue with the foods, why the population was not growing as quickly, it was because there was more bears, which resulted in a subsequent delisting in 2017. And then 2018, they were relisted. And this was based on three different things, one of which was a failure to recalibrate with a new population estimator, failure to commit to translocation for genetics for the population, and then for the service to conduct a remnant analysis. And so with this new model, we have those recalibrated numbers. We've agreed to manage in a framework within or above this framework of 800 to 950 bears. This has all been approved in the last year with an overarching strategy for the conservation for the future for grizzly bears in the GYE. Also, if you want to click on this one, Wayne, please. This past year, we successfully did translocate 2 grizzly bears for the Northern Continental Divide ecosystem. This is the female that we moved. So we don't have those fancy traps here in Wyoming, so we kind of had to do it our way to get that door open, but she did come out. The next day, or that same day we released her, they caught another bear that was released in Yellowstone National Park. Both those bears are still, they den in Wyoming, and will be very interesting to see what happens this year. I did have one other thing for Commissioner Roberts. We had to have a slight pause on our flashy tag research. We were moving forward with a pilot summer. We lost a federal grant that never came through, but this still allows us to put out some flashy tag transmitters we're trying to test the use of non-lethal deterrents for grizzly bear and wolf depredation in the Upper Green. We're very excited about it, but we lost some federal grant money. So we have a student in place, and we've gotten grant money from GYC. I see Matt Kuzakrio is in here. And so we are moving forward with a pilot session for that, but I did have a slide for that, but a lot of unknowns happened in the last couple of weeks. And so I think I need to talk about this component. Of course, I think a lot of people were waiting for January 20th when we were expecting a decision from the Fish and Wildlife Service regarding our petition, and then regarding a lot of other things going on. And so that decision came out on January 7th, and we were surprised to be surprised, I guess, put it that way. There was a lot in there, and it's hard to read over and over. We've done it. In essence, the response to the GYE petition is that bears have expanded too much that they're no longer distinct, and therefore we can't delist them. We have comments as to this in the proposed rule, but it's a frustration to punish bears and the people that have done so much to recover them. And I'm not a cartographer by trade, but I don't think that is too big of a change from when it was okay in 2017 to when it is changed now. And then if you're not familiar with the proposed rule to reclassify it, it essentially lumped all the previous recovery zones into one big amoeba. And there's just a lot more questions now, unfortunately. We have comments put forth, and I'll probably stop talking there as the director is looking at me, but smiling. There's a lot of frustration, and I appreciated the director's comments and the governor's comments that was kind of a slap in the face when we got a lot of this information that came out for all the work that's been done by so many people. This is blank for a reason. I had a lot of different things that I wanted to put up there, but right now, basically as written, it doesn't work for the future. There's no path to a delistable population. There's a lot more questions. There's this purported flexibility increase that we feel is more cumbersome, and Department of Ag and stock growers and livestock producers are pretty astute in this state, and they realize that it might sound good to some people, but it's actually probably going to make it more liable for them. And so again, the picture of a flaming dumpster I wanted to put in there did not go up there. But we haven't given up. We're very committed. There are multiple paths ahead. The comment period was extended, but we have extensive comments throughout the proposed rule. And of course, we're not good at waiting. We want to keep moving things forward and keep our finger on the pulse there are other options for congressional delisting litigation and even other things. Director Bruce has asked us to think creatively, which is appreciated. Again, it's frustrating, but the bears are coming out. We're still committed to doing our job, and we'll keep moving forward until we're told not to. And along those lines, I'm going to turn it over to Brian DeBolt to talk about our very busy last year with conflict.
Madam President. Dan, thanks. How many, I was curious, like on the Greater Yellowstone, we're looking, relatively around 900 bear or whatever. What's the other ones like Bitterroot and all the other different regions up there where is their grizzly populations?
The North Cascades and Bitterroot is right around 0. I think, the Cabinet Yaks is maybe 40 or I don't remember. I can get you those numbers. Northern Continental Divide is a lot like us. They're in excess of 1,000. We're in excess of 1,000. There's less than that Selway, Cabinet Yak, those populations, but realize that they're connected to 29,000 bears in Canada. And so that's part of our comments as well, with some issues with the distinct population segment analysis.
Madam President, may I? Dr. Montgomery, I'm going to circle way back to you were talking about mountain lions and a study that Justin Clapp was doing on scavenging relative to CWD. Do you have any idea when any conclusion might be reached, or we might be able to find out what the results of that research is? Yes,
Madam President, Commissioner Masterson, he's working on the analysis right now. He's presenting that component, the scavenging component just ended this winter. So there's still a lot of work. I mean, we're looking at, we also have cameras on it. So we're trying to document avian use, avian scavenging. And so there's a lot more looking at pictures. We're anti-AI, so we're kind of looking at them as we can. But we still expect those results to be out as soon as possible. And he will be giving a presentation to the commission, whether he knows it or not. Thank you.
Hello, Madam President, members of the commission, Director Bruce. Brian DeBolt. I am the large carnivore conflict coordinator for the state. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you. Welcome, new commissioners. And every year we follow Meredith, and she's always looking for more. And frankly, we're always looking for less. So anyway, less conflicts is what we're after. So I'll get right into it. So this slide is obviously it's from 1975. It was taken of bear number 25, who was a conflict bear. But the reason for throwing this out there is we've been doing this a long time. And by I mean we, I've been at it about 26 years, but the conglomerate of folks, agencies, personnel, this isn't a new thing, dealing with grizzly bears especially, excuse me, and all kinds of conflicts and monitoring. It's, again, we're a subset of a big team. So again, this is nothing new. So what do you mean, what's bear number 25? What's the relevance of that? So in case you don't know, as far as grizzly bears go, when monitoring of the grizzly bear population in the Yellowstone ecosystem started, every bear that was caught was started to just be numbered numerically, 1 through whatever. And we're at about bear 1,100 now. And there's another 300 or 400 bears that have been captured on top of that. Those 1,100 bears are bears that were big enough to wear a radio collar and be monitored at least for some aspect of time. Those other 300 or 400 bears that I mentioned are like cubs, subadults, different things. They weren't big enough maybe to wear a collar, and so they were released with mom. So lots of bears is kind of the point. Bear number 1 was caught northwest of here, just west of Crandall. Okay, in 1975. That's when the first bear was actually caught. Big subadult male, and Again, like I say, now we're at about around 1,100 marked individual chronologically numbered bears. So just a little perspective there, I guess. So it does take a huge team to do this, a lot of people. We do have a couple in the room right here, actually several. We have Phil Quick and Scott Stingley, and Mark Otten is also here. He's going to talk to you in a minute. His primary responsibility is running our information and education program through our Bearwise program, but he helps a lot with conflict. And Luke Ellsbury is actually down at the Mountain Lion Conference in New Mexico. He's stationed here in Cody. Mike Boyce is in Jackson, and Clint Atkinson. And also Ken Mills, who primarily does the wolf stuff, but they're both in Pinedale. So I just can't tell you enough how proud I am of those folks. They work so hard. And there's some aspects of the workforce I'm kind of disappointed in. You go downtown and buy something. And luckily, that is not lacking with these guys that work on these large carnivore conflicts. And again, it's a lot of cooperative work with different agencies, with non-governmental organizations, and also it couldn't be done without the support of our Wildlife Administration and the Commission. I think we've been pretty successful over a couple decades for sure. And anyway, really appreciate everybody's hard work into this. And again, it's nothing new. So even though grizzly bears are the primary instigator of conflict that we deal with, the 4 trophy game species, again, that Dan mentioned, we deal with all those species. So we'll run down Masterson next time this bear runs by and say, hey, hold this bear, right? So, and he was just west of here, actually. So nice big specimen of a bear. So conflicts, what are they? Everybody basically has a different definition. And our definition is pretty much, it's a bona fide, there's some sort of property damage, there's livestock damage, somebody's hurt, a bear is killed or injured as a result of people. It's a serious conflict. It's not just, a sighting. I drove by Togety Pass and saw some bears on the hillside. Not a conflict, okay? But wolves, kill and completely devour somebody's calf on a Forest Service allotment. That's a conflict, okay? So that's what we're talking about. So again, over time, and I'm kind of giving a little historical perspective here. This is shortly after grizzly bears especially were listed on the Endangered Species Act. We've been handling conflicts with these critters, since we've been recording them accurately within the department since 1982. You can see the majority of their conflicts definitely are grizzly bears, okay? And that's a lot of conflicts, a lot of experience from a lot of folks. So all trophy game conflicts over time are on the increase. This is nothing dramatic, okay? But as we know, that is simply a result of increasing populations of these trophy game animals and expanding into areas that are occupied by humans or used by humans for whatever reason, livestock grazing, recreation, you name it. So in 2024, what do we see? Kind of a similar trend, okay? Most of our conflicts with grizzly bears and on down the line. So these are 528 conflicts that our personnel, again, on the ground, investigated and verified were actually some sort of conflict, okay? So to break them down bit by bit, didn't have a lot of mountain lion conflicts this year. Again, most of them are killing sheep or they're killing dogs. That's what it is, okay? 18 conflicts is all, it wasn't too bad. And as a result of that, we removed 2 mountain lions in the state. We don't relocate mountain lions very often. It's just, I could go into long spiel, but it just doesn't work well. So we don't do it very often. Wolf conflicts, wolves kill cattle. That's what they do. They'll definitely kill some sheep. But for the most part, we see wolves killing cattle. I apologize, that middle bar is actually poultry. Yeah, I don't know we had some formatting stuff go on, but anyway, my fault. That's, wolf got in, killed some guys' chickens and it's not horse. So, that's what that is. And as a result, this is all within the trophy game zone, not the rest of Wyoming, just within the trophy game zone. Yeah, we had 34 conflicts and as a result of that, we removed 34 different wolves. So almost, the same amount of wolves were harvested by hunters in the trophy game area as were removed by agency folks in response to those depredations. So black bear conflicts, most of what we see, black bears getting into garbage. Okay, but it runs the whole gamut. You never know what you're going to run into with black bears coming into conflicts with people. We captured 25 black bears as a result of those conflicts. We removed the majority of them this year, probably mostly repeat offenders or pretty severe chronic situations, okay, where they posed some sort of threat to humans. And we relocated 9 of those critters. So grizzly bears, again, the majority of what we see, almost 250 conflicts we dealt with this year. We had 43 different management captures of these bears, and we did remove quite a few, 34, and that's because so many of them were outside of the suitable habitat line, okay? I mean, these are areas just right on the edge of town, for example. It's just areas that aren't, I don't think it's wise a management practice to, promote the existence of potentially dangerous large carnivores in some of these places. So, yeah, relocate a handful of them and a non-target. I threw that in there because it sounds so weird. It's like, well, you caught the wrong one. Well, it's not that we caught the wrong bear. It's that we know we didn't catch the right bear. And if we're going to take the tack to, let's say, remove a bear from the wild because of the conflict that it's going to be involved in, we want to make sure we got the right bear. That's why we investigate every one. It's not taken lightly. We're on the ground. We're, looking things over. It's really a scene investigation and trying to make sure we get the right bear. So, with this many bears on the landscape, though, you're bound to catch one you don't think's the right one. So catch one, we're just like, this isn't the right bear. We're going to cut him loose. We're not going to strike him. Let's get the right one. So I think it's important to emphasize that. We just don't, kill every bear that wanders into a trap or relocate them. So we make sure it's the right one.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Yes.
Man. Words are important, and I just want to make clear that I understand. Removal is going over the Rainbow Bridge. It's going to the farm to spend time with all the other grizzly bears.
Yes, President
Okay.
Lundvall, Commissioner Masterson, yes, it is lethal removal. In this case, it was. We can do a live removal, absolutely. We occasionally will place bears into some sort of zoo facility or some sort of captive facility, but it's removed from the wild. It's removed from the population. But let me expand on that just a second since you asked. The hard part about those live removals, especially with bears, it's very difficult. So when we get constituents that say, well, why don't you just put them in a rehab facility? Why don't you place them in a zoo? And we're all for it if you can find an adequate facility, okay? First of all, bears breed extremely well in captivity. Any facility that has the ability to house bears don't need them. They're full. They're actually probably trying to get rid of some, because they have too many. Secondly, any facility that maybe wants bears that doesn't have any it's not an adequate facility, okay? It's, Jim the welder from down the street, his wife loves wildlife and he decided he's going to weld up some cages and rehab bears. That's literally the type of stuff you're dealing with. So there's so many caveats to find an adequate facility for a live removal. So yeah, if they exist, we'll definitely do it, but it's much harder than it sounds. So anyway, thank you for that question.
So when you say relocation, it's predominantly lethal, but a relocation could be to a facility that wanted one, as opposed to excuse me, I'm sorry. So a removal is predominantly lethal, but it could also be transfer completely out of that ecosystem
That's exactly right. So if it's
Okay.
removed from the population,
in some way.
it's
Got it.
not coming back. It's basically considered a lethal removal, but yeah, some of them are still alive somewhere, like in the, whatever, Oklahoma City Zoo or something, so, yeah. So along with this expansion, and again, outside what we consider suitable habitat for bears, this is where we're seeing our conflicts. They're occurring on private lands. The majority of these conflicts are. And this is a credit to all the people that live and recreate on public lands. And again, all these agencies involved and all the decades of work putting into minimizing the amount of conflicts that occur on public lands, putting in bear-proof infrastructure, education, the whole works. But yeah, these bears are expanded into these areas where, yeah, people have just been living for decades without grizzly bears, and now they have to deal with it. So that's one thing we're seeing. And just to kind of put that into perspective, I've showed you this slide before, but I think it's pretty neat. The amount of private land occupied by grizzly bears in the Yellowstone ecosystem outside of suitable habitat is bigger than the area of New Jersey. Okay? So, frankly, I get frustrated when, for example, we get comments on the proposed rule that Dan was talking about from folks from New Jersey saying, you need to do this and you need to do that. And, you're not doing it correct. And it's like, wow, we have more grizzly bears occupying people's backyards than the entire state of New Jersey. So you're welcome. Yeah, you can come and see those bears. So yeah, what is it that drives these conflict numbers? There's a myriad of reasons. Social tolerance is a big one for sure. And I'll kind of go back to the beginning where we record, again, very specific, bona fide, verified conflicts. So in a year like this, where grizzly bears are in the news all the time, we're probably going to get a ton of phone calls about grizzly bears. A lot of jurisdictions record every single phone call. And I don't think that's quantifiable because, again, it varies year to year. We may actually have more conflicts, let's say last year, than we do this next year. But based on what's going on in the media and all the politics and everything else, we may get 10 times the number of phone calls about these critters reporting conflicts, in the next year. And it's not quantifiable. I don't think it means anything. So we just don't record that. But the social tolerance of these critters on the landscape definitely drives conflict numbers. Because somebody, if they have a bear tip over their garbage can, yeah, depending on their perspective and kind of the political and social atmosphere, they may not think anything of it and may not even give us a call. We may never know. But in any other given case, yeah, we may get a dozen phone calls on the same bear. So other things that, of course, are more quantifiable, the abundance of natural foods. This is Scott here. Man, bears in cornfields is starting to become a big issue. These bears just occupying different agricultural areas and different things. And it ends up being a good natural food for them. So, of course, the demographics of the population, the age structure, and the health of those specific individuals. There was a slide in there that Dan showed you and showing the pictures of the teeth of that grizzly bear, and they were just worn down to nubs. That's another really interesting thing is we've been catching grizzly bears, like I say, since again, the collective group of folks, since 1975. And a lot of those research bears and a lot of these conflict bears that we catch, they're old like that. They're like 25 plus years old, no teeth left, and they've never been caught before in the ecosystem, in places where we've been trapping for almost 50 years. And that bear's never been caught before. 50-year-old bear. So very interesting. We get a lot of new bears. They're not any of these chronologically marked bears that we've seen before. So very interesting. So what do we do when we respond to conflicts? Well, again, it's a multifaceted program. I'll kind of go through some of these, of course. But this slide, it looks kind of funny and techie. This is actually Scott's. And if you look at that's a grizzly bear looking straight up. So this is from a drone. Was it at night or just early in the morning? Okay, so he's checking his traps, okay? And you can see the snare on his foot, on his wrist there. So he knows he's caught, knows he's got a good catch. You can even tell it's a grizzly bear from the darn claws and everything. So, yeah, we're diving into a little bit of technology, but that's pretty cool. So, we got guys that are working hard. Like I say, I'm sure he was there till dark. Or the whole crowd of them, Mark and Luke and Phil and Scott, setting snares and traps and looking for tracks. And then they're there long before daylight, seeing what's going on. So they put in a lot of time. So the biggest part of our program is prevention. We want to prevent the conflict from happening in the first place. And I always stress electric fences. And yeah, I like to see, GYC folks and stuff here. Thank you. And because, man, the more electric fence we can put up, we can prevent a lot of damage, from garbage, from, in fact, some of those cornfields have got a lot of work we put into big, huge, permanent electric fence around some of these cornfields to keep the bears out. And they work around beehives, garbage cans, grain sheds, chicken coops, you name it. I love electric fences. They work good for prevention. So other preventative things we do, and I only got a tiny little bit on this because Mark, I'm so glad we got Mark. He's awesome. Doing all this education work from every group you can possibly imagine. Adults and young alike. If there's a group that wants us to talk to them, we will, and to try to spread the message. Securing garbage is huge. This is one project on the top. The GYC bought a bunch of garbage cans that we distributed to folks, near Lander that had a lot of chronic conflicts with black bears over the years. So they bought us a whole bunch of new trash cans, helped distribute them to all the residents up there. And this bottom one, the Forest Service called one day and said, man, just want to let you know, we're jerking all these old trash cans out of the campgrounds, replacing them with new stuff. And so you might not have trash service up in the campgrounds for a while. And I'm like, whoa, what are you doing with the old trash cans? Well, we're going to dump them. No, I'll take them. So we take them all and we just give them to whoever wants them. Storing, again, grain, garbage, whatever, you name it, try to prevent conflicts from occurring. So it's a big effort. And again, just talking to anybody, anytime, anywhere, to try to prevent, the more people know, just education programs in general, the more likely they are to make a good sound decision about what they themselves can do to avoid a conflict. So another part of our program is our compensation program, which you all unfortunately become very involved with at times when these damage claims become contentious. And it's just simply a compensation program to reimburse landowners for losses to their livestock. And the idea is it promotes a little bit of tolerance of those critters on the landscape. So yeah, there's some credit due to those folks, these livestock producers in Wyoming, for the success of grizzly bear recovery and wolf recovery, because they have a tolerance for it, they're getting a little bit of money. I mean, is it perfect? It's really a great system. It is, but that's where we meet in the middle with some of these things. So anyway, verified damages only, again. And the only reason I put this slide up here, more likely than not is the actual written standard that we go by. When we go look at, Jolovich calls and he decides to come up to God's country here and run some cattle around Cody. And anyway, he thinks something gets killed by a grizzly bear. We're not just going to take his word for it. We're going to go look and we're going to make sure we examine every single carcass. But with that being said, he gets the benefit of the doubt. You know what? If it's anywhere close, we're going to call it for you. Yeah, it's going to be a verified kill by, whatever predator that we know did it. And some of them are fresh, like that one on the left. It's buried, but it's still fresh. The whole carcass is there. It's a little easier to examine. The one on the right, it's just a hide, and you think, well, what's there? Well, if it's old and dried up in the sun and it's as hard as this table, we'll take it back, we'll soak it out, look for canine punctures, trauma, that sort of stuff. We'll give these folks the benefit of the doubt. So when we make the call, yeah, this has been killed, that person's getting the benefit of the doubt. When we say no, there's a almost zero chance that a trophy game animal had anything to do with it. Okay. Again, a lot of experience, a lot of decades of work into this, a lot of scientific, a lot of training, scientific evaluation. So it's not taken lightly. So when all of our options are exhausted, education and trying to prevent and, work with folks, we may have to, capture these animals. And then again, our options are either relocation or removal, whether that be live removal or lethal removal. So, and with grizzly bears, that is of course under the authorization of the Fish and Wildlife Service. They make the call on whether that happens. We make a recommendation and they basically give us our blessing or not. Another little component, well, it's big when it happens. Luckily, we haven't had a lot of serious responses from our predator attack team. And I attribute a lot of that to our education programs. We're hopefully educating people how to avoid, having conflicts with these critters that may be serious enough to lead to a human injury or death. Okay, but we still have trained folks in place. This is the only injury we had here in the bottom of the picture this year. A guy got bit on the leg by a grizzly bear. And luckily he's okay. Doing fine. He did kill the bear during the encounter. We had 6 of these reported self-defense shooting investigations. Several have been adjudicated and found to be okay. Others are still, being looked at. But anyway, we, as you can see in this top picture, we got game and fish folks, we got some park personnel, we got local police departments involved in some of this training. We get everybody involved to do this on a regular basis, so we're ready when it does happen. But other things we do within the kind of the confines of the conflict program is that expands to every species of wildlife that we're responsible for in the state is our conductive electrical weapons, or kind of commonly known as taser training. We don't use these on people. Okay, it's not part of our law enforcement program at all. It's specifically for like entangled or injured wildlife. But anyway, just another part of what we do. So like Dan mentioned, we deal with, this is the day where, I grew up like a lot of folks in this room where, man, you pick up the phone and you would, and now, you basically have a computer in your hand. And so, and social media is huge. And the amount of misinformation that's out there that we have to battle on a daily basis is brutal. So it's really tough. And I threw this one in here just because I wanted to tell you the background. So you probably all heard, this last spring had a grizzly bear on that western slope of the Bighorns that we ended up catching in response to some livestock depredation. And here was, of course, one of the headlines that come out that after years of rumors that there were grizzly bears in the Bighorn Mountains, the Wyoming Game and Fish Department had to finally admit that they were there. No, it's not like these grizzly bears have been there for a long time. Okay? And I'll tell you the story. So, in hindsight's 2020, once this bear showed up, it was actually a full-grown cow had been killed on the west slope of the Bighorns. And, you know, with our communication internally, it's like, hey, we got this cow that was killed and, you know, so we need a trap over here, maybe try to catch a bear. And I, you know, I instantly said, wait a minute. What? That's not a black bear deal. So anyway, ended up catching a grizzly bear out of there. But this bear, that grizzly bear, which is not this one, that's just a stock photo, I'm sure showed up, wandered probably out of the Owl Creeks, wandered down by Jibo. You know, that is north of Vermont, just kind of that old, kind of abandoned mining community, showed up down by Jibo. Some folks called and said, hey, we saw a grizzly bear. So our folks respond, sure enough, grizzly bear tracks. Yep, that was a grizzly bear. Didn't hear anything of it for a long time. Well, then clear down the Knowood, north of Lysite, guy sends in a video and he says, hey, what do you think of this bear? This is about a month later. Okay, this is 2 years ago. Yeah, well, that's a grizzly bear. That's what I think of that. And so, and then nothing. We put up trail cameras, did some monitoring stuff and went and looked for more tracks. Nothing. Didn't hear hide nor hair of this bear for, well, the rest of the year. Well, late that summer, early fall, had a couple cattle depredations up, I think it was off the Hazelton Road up there above Buffalo. Yeah, it looked like bear depredation, but didn't get to it till late. For a lot of reasons. We just didn't put the pieces together then. Definitely had some dead cows, but didn't know what was going on. Well, then this one shows up the next spring, this recent spring. Yeah, killing cows down off the west face. Same bear. There's just no doubt. It just common sense tells you that's the bear. He's not marked. He's not one we've handled. It's not one we've moved, but all point, you know, looks like a duck, walks like a duck, probably a duck. So that's the story behind that. I didn't plan on telling that whole story, but there you go. Anyway, so in summary, yeah, these conflicts are increasing because again, lots of bears, lots of people, lots of wolves, lots of people, and they're interacting with each other. So it's a very dynamic, you know, social, political, and arena. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So I just put this up here real quick. So those conflicts that we deal with on an annual basis, I kind of queried out some of the work hours that these guys are recording. And so basically for each conflict, they're recording about 12 hours of time and 160 miles. That's nothing. That is like the most efficient workforce ever. Because you can't drive, you know, up to Pahaska and back, you know, without it being close to 100 miles, just right there, just for one conflict. And again, a lot of these times that we respond, it's not even a conflict. So those miles, you know, are all wrapped into the times they responded to stuff that's not a conflict. And for example, another time they may respond to something 5 or 6 times that's just one conflict. Because it spans over several days. One bear, you know, let's say over several days, or one wolf killing a bunch of sheep or cows over time. So just the point of this slide is extremely efficient folks doing a very good job. And like I said, I couldn't be more proud of them. They just do a fantastic job and appreciate working with all of them. So that's all I have for you, unless there's questions.
Madam President, if I might, Brian, if I'm just curious on, there was 6 aggressive conflicts. Kind of take me through the scenario on what you considered aggression versus like being protective. How would
Okay.
you subcategorize that?
So specifically which species? Okay, so grizzly bears and all species are pretty similar. So that is one thing where we get a lot of calls. Oh, I'm sorry. So President Lundvall, Commissioner Roberts, we get a lot of calls. Oh, got this aggressive bear. That is so common. Got this aggressive bear. We show up. What's it doing? Well, it walked by over there. We banged pots and pans at it. What'd it do? Well, it just kind of kept going. It's really not an aggressive bear, so no conflict. Now, if a bear shows some overt aggression that's more than just a natural defense of young, defense of property, or being harassed, for example, it's some overt aggression that's not natural. Yeah, we'll check that up as aggressive behavior. So. Okay, thank you. Mark is next. Oh, Dan.
Just wanted to introduce Mark Otten, who's our Bearwise coordinator. I know we're a little over time, but I want Mark to be able to talk about some of our Bearwise work. You want to come on up, Mark?
So, Madam President, members of the commission, Director Bruce, my name is Mark Otten. I'm the Bearwise coordinator, and I'm just going to be talking to you guys a little bit about what we do in the Bearwise program and going over a little bit of the work that we did this past year, and touch on a couple of the things that we want to do in this coming year. So, kind of at its core, the main function of the Bearwise program is to be able to travel around the state. We want to give people accurate information. As we talked about, there's a lot of misinformation, especially when it comes to bear safety. I've heard a lot of really wild things from people about what they should and shouldn't do. So we make sure that we give them the best information possible on how to respond in an encounter and how to prevent conflicts from ever happening. And also kind of taking some of the data that we collect, at the upper echelons of science type level and translating that down into a format that's a little more palatable to the everyman. So as Dan kind of touched on before, we got to do this Western Black Bear Conference this year. That's something that Ryan Kinderman and Dan put together. Brought a lot of different experts around from 3 different countries, but it gave me a great chance to embarrass people with our bear spray training and test everybody's skills. We use our mechanical charging bear. It's called Robo Bear. This was a video, but it was a little bit too embarrassing for people's professional reputation. And there were a lot of bear experts that were going home thinking, I really, really need to start practicing that. Nobody in our department, we were stellar across the board. But yeah, so it's a really great training tool that we use at all kinds of events. Oh, so it did stay in there. The guy on the left is dead. Dead. All right. So yeah, one of the things that we did this past year that we're really happy to have done, gotten taken care of, we teamed up with GYC, who played like a really pivotal role in this whole project, and with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and U.S. Department of Agriculture, just to name a few of the partners. We had quite a few on this corn maze fencing project. Essentially, there's a very popular corn maze that's north of Cody here. It's in Clark, Wyoming. And over the years, it had become a very significant conflict hotspot. To kind of put that into perspective, how significant, in 2023, almost 20% of all conflict captures for grizzly bears across the state came out of that cornfield or the immediately surrounding fields. And the reason that we were so keen on not letting grizzly bears hang out in this particular area is because that corn maze sees almost 10,000 people visit over a 5-week time period. That time period happens to coincide with the absolute peak of grizzly bear conflicts and when we typically see conflicts resulting in human injury. So it's a ongoing and developing human safety threat that we're able to, knock on wood, hopefully take off the board into the future indefinitely. It was a pretty substantial project, putting in really heavy duty permanent electric fencing. It was almost 2 miles of it, involved a lot of partners, a lot of moving pieces. We got to use a little bit of technology that so far as my knowledge has not been used in the state thus far. They're these really large, heavy duty drive over electric mats. So it substitutes a standard electric gate. So it doesn't interfere with the day-to-day operations of the farm. It's a benefit, not a hindrance. If you've ever driven a tractor, you know you don't want to get off it and back onto it to open gates 100 times a day, or you're going to have many hours added onto the length of your day. So at its core, the Bearwise program is about in-person interaction. However, I'm just one person, and I do get help from other members of the carnivore section when time allows. But if we stick purely to that, we have a very limited reach. It's limited to, you know, however many people I can see, however many events I can do in a year. So we were trying to think of how we could expand that and essentially how we could reach some really hard to target demographics that account for a fair number of conflicts and problems that we see inside of the state. People like short-term visitors, out-of-state hunters, you know, tourists. They may only be here for, you know, 5 days or less, where we're not going to have time to reach them with some of our traditional channels for outreach. So we put together a 30-second basically TV or video ad that we play in the Yellowstone Regional Airport. We teamed up with Safari Club International Foundation to do this, and with Wyoming Outfitters and Guides Association. We also work closely with the airport in town here. And it basically just condenses down a lot of really good information, as much as we can in 30 seconds. And it helps us reach those very difficult to target demographics. Here's the ad right there. I don't know if you need to play that. Oh, okay. Oh.
Welcome to Cody. Everywhere outside these doors is grizzly bear country. Give wild animals the space and respect they need. They can and will defend themselves. Hike in groups, make noise, store attractants properly. Bears do not like surprises, so stay away from their food, their young, and their personal space.
But
every adult
this ended
needs
up
to
being
carry
really
bear spray
successful.
and know how to use it.
By
For more
75,000
detailed information, please check the magazine
close
rack
to
for our
75,000
Bearwise brochure.
Over the years, we got an exact number from the airport, and it plays in those baggage carousel areas and throughout the terminal, so that you've got a really captive audience. Many of them are here specifically to see bears. You have a question?
Shockingly, I do. Madam President, you mentioned West Yellowstone Airport, you mentioned Cody Airport, and I was wondering about the Jackson Airport.
Oh, this played purely in the Cody Regional Airport this time around. We tried a few different advertising methods and a few different avenues of outreach that we haven't tried in the past. So we kind of treated this like a pilot program, you know, no pun intended. So, all right. So one of the other things that we did, trying to target even harder to reach demographics that are traditionally very difficult to do. And so to my knowledge, this has never been done by a wildlife agency at any point, anywhere. So we decided to go with gas pump advertising. And when you think about some of the very difficult to reach people in our community, you know, rural areas, people that don't have maybe a huge digital footprint and very low, you know, free time. When, you know, when we think about our agricultural communities, got 30 hours of work to do in 24 hours every day. It's can be somewhat unreasonable to expect them to show up at an in-person community event, especially if it's a considerable drive from where they are. One thing that everybody has to do is the common denominator, everybody has to get gas. So this deals with people that are maybe just in the state for a day or two, passing through, camping once, and still potentially causing problems if they don't have any awareness of bear safety. So this was a much smaller ad campaign than the all year round one at the airport. This was only 84 days. It was focused specifically on bear safety while hunting, which is the highest risk activity class as far as incidents resulting in human injury with bears. And this played starting at the beginning of hunting season and ended just as the bears were going into hibernation. Only played for 84 days and then 23 different locations. We ended up, you know, wildly exceeding what we thought we could with over 300,000. It was very close to 330,000 people that we reached with this. And those are almost all unique impressions. So the other thing we like about this type of advertising, as opposed to just standard digital advertising with outreach, You only get about 0.1% engagement in traditional digital advertising. That's where maybe your messaging might appear as a banner or a short skippable ad on a YouTube video, like potentially, or on a web page. It's only about 1 in 1,000 people will look at it. There's been quite a few studies that show that this type of advertising, you get over 95% engagement, purely because the vast majority of people leave their phone in the car while they're pumping gas. This one, we're really happy to work with the same partners on. And this, vastly.
Here are some ways hunters can be bear wise. Here are some ways hunters can be bear wise this season.
This one is specifically targeted on
Stay within sight of your
hunter
partners
safety.
and never hunt alone. Look for bear sign. Drag carcasses
Ongoing
away
and
from gut
ever-present
pile
problems just
or
by the
kill
nature
site
of
into an
hunting.
open area. When dressing game, one person should act as a lookout. Approach from upwind.
We were really happy to
if returning from
team
a
up with those
carcass.
same people.
Glass the area and
the
never
amount
assume
that
a
we got
bear is
back for
absent.
the amount that we put in.
Always carry bear
to this
spray and know
effort,
how to use it.
It's huge, and this is so many more times more than the previous best of these types of demographics that we've ever been able to reach.
Here are some
in the
ways
Bear
hunters
Wise
can be
program.
bear wise this season. Stay within.
All right, so one of the more traditional ways that we reach out is in print format. That's just going to be newspapers, magazines, brochures. We have these really great Bears in Wyoming brochures that we've put together. The department makes, or has, originally designed and everything. It's got really great information, about 8 pages worth of it. And we really like to hand those out at different types of events where we might just be one table amongst many. And people kind of filing by. You might only get 20 seconds to talk to somebody, but you can give them that. Tell them that there's going to be a lot more detailed information in there, and it also tells them who to contact and how to contact them if they want more detailed information than even that. One thing we did get to do this year that we don't typically get to do, we gave out a number of different interviews about bear safety. We gave this to USCCA magazine because they were doing multiple issues about animal attacks and the safety surrounding it. So because of that, we were able to get information from the Bear Wise program straight into there about how to avoid conflicts and address conflicts with black bears, with grizzly bears, with mountain lions. That was wildly successful. We had no idea that it would be that much, but it ended up with over 730,000 people that read that because they're paid subscriptions. According to the analytics people, they've told me that it's a fair amount more than that because they have somewhat more than just one person read it for one subscription, but we'll just stick to what we can measure pretty accurately. So at its core, like I said, in-person presentation is by far the most valuable type of outreach that we can do. We can give the highest level of detail and the most quality as far as our training goes to the general public this way. I am only one person, so we're inherently limited in that regard, but we managed to reach over 6,000 people, 6,023 to be exact, over 67 different presentations. And that's anything from, workshops to school programs to camps to occasionally we'll do training for different agencies if they don't feel like they have the appropriate training to handle an area so saturated with large carnivores. Even organizations like, Rocky Mountain Power will ask us to train up their people because they end up in the backcountry quite a bit. And this is, what we really like the best, obviously. And if we're just going to add up all of our numbers together there, we ended up with over 1.1 million people reached overall. We're really happy about that. That's many, many times more people than the previous maximum that the Bear Wise program has been able to reach. I think it's like 20 times more, something like that. So we're looking forward to continuing that, hopefully exceeding on it. We have every intention to. Which brings me to stuff we're thinking about doing in the upcoming calendar year. So we really are interested in increasing the amount of bear resistant infrastructure in the back country, in the front country, basically in all of grizzly bear occupied range. We want to make it as easy as possible for someone to make like a good choice rather than a lazy choice or even an irresponsible one. People being people, if you give them half a reason to maybe do the thing that wasn't quite as smart, they'll probably do it. So we just want to take away as many excuses as we can and give people as many chances to make a good decision when they're recreating as possible. The other thing we do, every year we provide these living safely in large carnivore country workshops. In my opinion, they're the absolute best type of outreach that we do. It's where myself and maybe a couple of other large carnivore biologists will go to, we have a few different key towns that we focus on and we'll invite landowners to come, anybody from the public, and we get really, really granular about all the different ins and outs of all of our different species. And we also talk about what resources are available to our constituents and landowners and stakeholders in those areas and how we can address their specific problems. Sometimes they can come with a problem that is almost exclusive to them and their specific situation. And that's the perfect time where we can tell them how we can help them in that sort of situation, how we can avoid it. The other thing, we just want to expand that out to many more cities because we feel that it's a really valuable resource. And when people leave that, by the time they leave, they're in the top percentile of people that are most prepared to deal with a bear encounter or a wolf encounter or mountain lion encounter, all of the above, and how to prevent them, which is more important. We would really like to expand our digital outreach in airports. Like I said, both of these were kind of pilot programs that were very successful. So we're thinking about trying to get that in more airports across the state. As far as the gas pump TV videos, we'd like to expand out how many days we're running advertisements, also the types of advertisements. We also really like that because if we're having, say, a specific problem in just the Sheridan region or just in the Jackson region, then we don't have to run that message all across the state. We can run it right there, right where it needs, and we can change it pretty quickly and adjust to developing issues in real time. So with that, I think I'll hand it back to Dan for closing comments and questions.
No, he won't. Madam Chair, may I? Real quick.
Yeah.
The outreach you're doing is amazing and thank you for that. And it seems to me like you're a person well spent if you're able to get over 1 million touches in one way or the other. Do you get any grant or NGO support for your efforts?
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner Masterson. So yeah, we, especially with these projects where we're trying something new, it's very difficult to pull from a set budget. When you're trying something that hasn't been needed in the past, it might pay off big, but maybe it doesn't. So we work pretty closely with a number of different NGOs. For example, the Corn Maze Initiative, GYC was really instrumental in that. We couldn't have done that without their support. And there were a number of other NGOs and agencies that worked with us on that. Safari Club International Foundation is a huge one. They kind of, they provided the Robo Bear for us. They allow us to do those bear spray giveaways, all those types of things where we just don't have the resources, or it might even be fiscally irresponsible for us to just swing out on our own, kind of go rogue and say, we're just going to try this new thing. It's going to be very expensive. And,
Okay.
Relatively, I should say, it's actually very cheap in comparison to the total budgets.
Second, I only have 3, I promise. Have you had any success reaching out to travel and tourism or the state travel and tourism to try to get them to do any banners or, little spot to click on their website?
Yeah, so thank you, Madam President, Commissioner Masterson. I have talked with Chamber of Commerce. That's actually on my agenda for this year, but I chose to only stick with the most concrete of upcoming plans. But yeah, that's something we've absolutely explored and we're looking to expand that
And I'm talking state travel and tourism. I didn't know if you knew.
I was
Yeah.
talking just about this regional
Okay.
area,
All right.
but I would absolutely be looking into that if that's a possibility.
Last, where do you find information about the workshops?
The workshops, we'll put out a series of different press releases. That's through our
Okay.
comms department and
Thank
any
you.
way we can.
Thank you. Thank you, madam.
Welcome.
It's a hard act to follow. I really don't have any further comments other than what you already know from us and our commitments to the wildlife and people that are here in Wyoming. And I know we went over time. My bosses are quite nervous, I'm sure, right now, but if you have any other questions,
Thank you.
thank you. The Tigers beat the Cardinals in 7 games in 1968.
All right, before President McBarnes comes up, I just noticed that we have a visitor in the back of the room. Good to see past Commission President Richard Ladwig. Good to see you, Richard. All right, Chris.
Check. Director Bruce, members of the commission, thank you all so much. I'm gonna keep this presentation hopping and very efficient for you. Commissioner Haskell, welcome, and Commissioner Mai, seeing us on Zoom here. Really look forward to getting to know you gentlemen better and working with you. And congratulations, what a prestigious position to be appointed to. So my name's Chris McBarnes. I'm president of the Wildlife Fund, live over on the east side of the Bighorn Mountains in Buffalo, Johnson County. Just content of my presentation here. Sorry to our veteran commissioners. I am going to do just a brief overview for the new commissioners of the mission of the fund. And again, we can sit down and hash this out in detail. There's no way possible to go through all the programs of the fund in 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm just going to give a high level overview. I'm going to talk about an exciting West-wide initiative that the Wildlife Fund is helping lead. Announce a 6-figure gift for Wyoming migration corridors, and then give a brief shout out to youth camps that will be occurring this summer. So the mission of the fund, we were created by the Wyoming Game and Fish Commission back in the year 2019. Past commissioners, Pat Crank, Mike Schmid, David Rael, Pete Doobie, Ralph Brokaw, Galen Bird, saw a need to create a mechanism for private partners to give to common sense on the ground wildlife projects across Wyoming. We do not fund green trucks. We do not fund salaries. We come in and we invest in good projects, good research that without private sector support, maybe quite wouldn't get over the finish line. So that's what we're looking to do. We are an autonomous entity. We have our own bylaws. We're a 501c3, so those who give to us get that tax deduction, that tax benefit. And according to our bylaws, we have a liaison as a commissioner, and our director is also an ex officio non-voting member of our board. And that's very, very important to make sure that now and into the future, the Wildlife Fund always stays in lockstep with the strategic vision and mission of the commission and the department. Right now, your liaison is John Masterson. He loves asking questions. He loves answering questions. So I really encourage you all tonight at Hall of Fame and in the days to come, pepper John about the Wildlife Fund and his time spent with us. We also take great pride in unburdening the biologists and folks with game and fish across the state. As you all have seen today, as you always see, these folks have a million things going on. They're the hardest working people in the business. So if we can create an efficient process when they have a private partner that wants to support their work, we can bring it in through the Wildlife Fund, set up a streamlined grant process, get that money on the ground efficiently and effectively, free up their time at their desk and in the backcountry to do the good work they're charged with. That's why the Wildlife Fund is here. And again, we always stay focused on your top priorities. So the director's priorities, the commission's priorities, your big projects, your big initiatives, that's what we're going to be marching down the road to accomplish. And so this is really exciting. So Commissioner Haskell, we're only 5 years old. We turned 5 years old on March 9th. So we're still a very young organization. But over the past several years, I've constantly asked the question, why isn't there some type of association of nonprofit state agency partners like the Wildlife Fund? Because what you folks did back in the year 2019, it's not unique. Several states across the West, Idaho, Arizona, Montana, Oregon, Washington, on, have very similar organizations like the Wildlife Fund. So I got to talking to the executive director of the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, Zach Lowe, and made a presentation to all the directors and commissioners that came from across the West to Jackson this past December. And that turned into one thing, which led to another. And the Wildlife Fund has officially been invited to lead the first ever that I know of its kind, an event we're calling Connecting the West, creating an association of like-minded, like-statured organizations such as the Wildlife Fund under the umbrella of WAFWA in Provo, Utah this June. It's very exciting for me. I mean, as you all have heard countless times today, Wyoming leads the way when it comes to wildlife, and the fact that the Wildlife Fund can be the convener of bringing, you know, Idaho, Montana, all these states together, share best practices, and learn from one another. We're very excited about that, and I think it speaks to our momentum and our trajectory. And I think, to be quite frank with you, what we're seeing on the federal landscape in terms of funding, the economy to a certain extent, anytime we can connect in private dollars to the conservation efforts across this state, it's going to be very, very important. And us working together with other state agencies across the West is only going to benefit that. So this is something we're excited about. Want to announce, I believe, a very significant gift. $250,000 to me is a lot of money. And so the Volgina Foundation is committing $250,000 to migration work in the state of Wyoming, focusing on just good common sense on the ground projects. We're wanting to do a better job of interlinking ourselves with top priorities of the commission and the department. As I mentioned, that's what we're here to do. So I've had incredibly fruitful conversations with your CFO, Meredith Wood, and others. And what we're going to start doing is these pots of funds, I'm going to send you all a memo every October to say, here's what we've got, here's what it's earmarked for. Let your biologists who understand the top priority projects in the region bring requests to the Habitat Technical Panel within Game and Fish, and then high-level leadership will help direct those biologists out so that we can be very strategic in where we're going after funding for in these particular projects, and we can make sure that the Wildlife Fund's money is used to the highest and top priorities of the commission and the department. So we're going to start that process moving forward, and this $250,000 will be in that pot for your biologist starting this fall. And then very quickly, Commissioner Haskell, Commissioner Mai, all our veteran commissioners know this, but we also have a heavy presence in getting youth in the outdoors, at-risk youth, underprivileged youth. No one does a better job of that than the department. And what I'll tell folks is, I know that the registration for NISH's camps at the Whiskey Mountain Conservation Camp, those registrations are open until April 1st. Go look at those first. We made sure to schedule our camps so they don't overlap. So if you're a young man or a young lady in Wyoming, 12 to 15, and one of those dates don't work for you, look at our Inspire Kid camps. You can scan this QR code. They're held at the Little Jenny Ranch in Bondurant. Madam President will be speaking to our young ladies again this June. So Commissioner Lundvall, thank you so much for doing that. And we'll have a big June in front of us in terms of getting youth in the outdoors. And with that, I really appreciate your time, appreciate your leadership, and I'll stand for any questions. Nothing? Really? You can't come up with something?
Madam President, thanks, Chris. But sometimes Commissioner Masterson answers his own questions also.
Point well taken. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, Madam President, Commissioners, Director Bruce, I'm Amanda Verheuel, and I'm Executive Director for the National Bighorn Sheep Center. And just to give you a little bit of a background on the National Bighorn Sheep Center, we were first developed in 1993 through a cooperative agreement with the BLM, Wyoming Game and Fish Department, Forest Service, and the town of DuBois. And the National Bighorn Sheep Center is an extension of your services, providing wildlife interpretive exhibit, education and outreach programs, and information. We are dedicated to conserving, enhancing, and protecting Wyoming's wildlife resources. So our mission is to provide education and outreach for the national conservation of wild sheep, wildlife, and wildlands. We aim to educate, inspire, and conserve. Just to introduce our staff, I introduce myself. I'm the executive director here. I've got the marketing and brand coordinator, Anna Mabey, with me today. Our museum coordinator, Anna Miller, and education manager and biologist, Beth Cable, are actually getting ready to do an outreach program for the Utah Wild Sheep Foundation banquet in Salt Lake this weekend. With us, not with us today also is Jenny Bouts. She was our 2024 summer intern. A wonderful internship program here at the center. And I'm going to have a video of her in just a moment. So 2024, by the numbers, our admission was just under 6,000 visitors. Our outreach, 47,000 individuals, and those are in-person outreaches. 54 participants in our eco tours and our school groups, just over 3,000 students, and we have just over 200 members. Our financials, just to give a snapshot, net ordinary income, we ended up with a positive last year. A lot of that in thanks to a commissioner's permit provided by Mr. Ladwig there. And that's a huge part of what we do. Our annual budget is just under 300,000, so pretty small budget. One commissioner's permit provided us with 42,000. Gift shop sales, memberships, donations, grants, constantly fundraising for the Sheep Center. Okay, and if we could cue the video here, we just have a 5-minute presentation from our University of Wyoming partnership. Okay, so it looks like maybe the video is not going to work. In the meantime, I'll move right along because I know we're short on time today. But just to introduce a little bit of our board of directors, new board members, Cray Lutz and Randy Taylor coming in. Al Garrett's our president, and he's here today. Steve Kilpatrick, our vice president, being awarded with the Wyoming Outdoor Hall of Fame award this evening. We just have an incredible staff right now and board, and I'm just really excited about where we're headed. State and national outreach. Last year, we reached 15 different counties throughout Wyoming, 37 chapters working with the Wild Sheep Foundation, just nationally trying to foster as many partnerships as we possibly can. Just love the 32 years of developing these partnerships and fostering them further into the future. Events and outreach, just some examples of the different events and outreach that we get to throughout the year. We're really focused this year on really quality outreaches, individual outreaches, whether it's with youth or adults. We want to make sure that the connections that we have are really inspirational and going to make a difference in the future. Camp Bighorn is our place-based camp that we have up at the conservation camp right outside of DuBois, Wyoming. This last year, we had 31 different campers, and out of that 31, 16 were awarded full scholarships, and that's from 9 different states. And what's really exciting about our Camp Bighorn program is just all the experts and partnerships that we have that come to make this camp experience really unique and one of a kind. Not trying to compete, just an additional, like I said, outreach arm for the Game and Fish Department. Some more about our educational programs, the different tours that we do, eco tours, adult education webinars, classroom presentations, our STEM events. We were just in 3 different cities throughout Wyoming just in the last week. Our distance learning programs really expanding with Beth Cable, our biologist. She's really working to make these sheep trunks more effective. And then we offer a virtual tour of the museum in addition to that sheep trunk. So new and upcoming, we had to redirect some funds this last year, but we're really excited about that because that gives us an opportunity to upgrade our Ron Ball Gallery. We're doing some office updates right now to make things more effective. We have a small, kind of a small crew working in a really small space, so that's important to us. And then the museum upgrades. We want to create a more informative and immersive experience. So it's time to do a big upgrade, and we're excited about that. Our partnership working locally with the Warehouse 21 out of Cheyenne, fantastic organization. And then just more about our partnerships. Can't say enough about that. The different agencies that we work with, education. We are currently the home of the Du Bois Visitor Center. So 1/3 of the population coming down the highway that's headed to Yellowstone National Park will come through our area. So there's an opportunity for them to stop at the center and educate them further. Would like to foster a further partnership with the Wildlife Fund. And just a little bit more about our summer internship program. It's an incredible opportunity for students in the university. We have one every single summer. 50% of their time is with biologists and with different entities out in the field. So not just there in the museum, but they're also working out in the field, volunteering their time to do these projects. And it's just a really amazing opportunity. So hopefully I can maybe send you that video that Jenny did. She really wanted to be here meeting with me today. And with that, I will stand for any questions. Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Nope. Your by the numbers slide, admission outreach eco tours. I don't have anything to compare that to. Can you tell me, are you seeing an upward trend, flat, kind of a decrease? Can you give me some context?
Sure, Madam President, Commissioners, Commissioner Matterson. Absolutely. So those outreach numbers, 47,000 in the last year, that's actually double of the year prior. So we doubled our outreach numbers last year. And again, that's in-person outreaches. We have a lot more with our videos. So small organization, but doing a lot, relatively minimal. We are in a Game and Fish building, so we are very grateful for the Game and Fish, and what you provide for us is huge. Madam President, Commissioners, admissions compared to it's up. It was definitely up in 2024 in comparison to 2023. That amount was just about 5% increase in admissions. You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, looks like we have a public comment. Megan Riley.
Hello, Commissioners, President Lundvall, Director Bruce. I'm actually just quickly going to speak as a private citizen and resident of Du Bois. My name is Megan Riley, and obviously you heard about the broad reach that this organization has. They're small but mighty and get the message out to a lot of people, but I just want to say that you cannot understate the importance of this sheep center to the people of Du Bois. It's really a community hub. It touches the life of every single child in the K-12 school, and it just really instills a sense of pride in every resident over these sheep that we share space with at the head of that Wind River Valley. So thank you so much for supporting that organization. And yeah, I can answer questions, but I think we're ready to go dinner.
Thank you, Megan. Okay. All right, we have 2 public comments here at the end. Cliff LeBlanc.
Thank you, commissioners, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I really wanted to talk about Title 23 and fair chase. Basically, what I wanted to ask and give a little information on is that several states have already acted to preserve fair chase by hunting, by restricting certain technologies. Colorado and Idaho prohibit the use of smart scopes and computerized aiming systems that assist in targeting. Some states have also restructured hunting seasons or implemented equipment restrictions to maintain ethical hunting conditions. Wyoming, however, still allows long-range shooting, smart optics, and wireless coordination with minimal regulation. How does Wyoming approach, compare, and what factors have prevented the state from implementing similar fair chase protections?
Thank you, sir, Madam Chair. Thank you for your public comment. I think you're asking us to take it under advisement. We don't want this to get into a answer and question session, but we would welcome outside of the commission time to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Jason West.
Madam President, Director Bruce, Commissioners, I'm Jason West, and I'm representing a grassroots organization that's been newly formed, and we are calling it the Wyoming Mule Deer Alliance. And I'm representing our group and hunters across Wyoming who love to hunt mule deer each and every year. Personally, I'm a passionate Wyoming range hunter who spends 45 to 50 nights in the backcountry every year hunting mule deer. As a group, we're a collection of engaged mule deer hunters, and the Wyoming Mule Deer Alliance was organized to advocate on behalf of mule deer herds, mule deer hunter, and mule deer herds, perpetuate sound science-based management, and promote public support of mule deer hunting opportunities. We are a pro-mule deer and pro-mule deer hunters organization. We are not anti-hunting anything. We are not anti-anything, but rather advocate on behalf of the deer who cannot advocate for themselves and the quiet majority of hunters. And due to my schedule, I scheduled this to be here, hoping that the presentation by Deputy Chief Binfet would be today, but it wasn't. So this is kind of a pre-comment. But I just wanted to highlight those mule deer conversations that happened this past winter. I attended the Pinedale meeting, which was very valuable, and I appreciate the Game and Fish doing that. And he's going to go over the full presentation of that tomorrow. But I just wanted to highlight some of the diverse viewpoints that were there, but also emphasize the overwhelming support for general season mule deer management. Just like the current hunter attitude survey results that we've gotten back, one of those questions was, how important is it to you to hunt mule deer every year? And 96% responded with either very moderately or a little bit important. Only 4% said not at all. Another question asked, how acceptable or unacceptable would limited quota seasons be, or would limited quota seasons in all hunt areas in Wyoming be to you? 55% answered unacceptable, 10% neutral, and only 35% acceptable. And I would guess that those ones that were neutral would probably not like it once they experienced it. And most importantly, for me at least, is renowned Game and Fish Wyoming range biologist Gary Freilich, his on-the-ground reporting from this past winter. I hope you've seen some of the emails he sent in the most recent one last week, highlighting This winter is the second consecutive winter that we're observing high overwinter survival in that Wyoming range herd, including sublet herd. The buck doe ratios are up to 28 bucks to 100 does, which is nearly back up to that 30 to 45 objective range. And these conditions are obviously allowing rapid recovery of the population. So tomorrow when you listen to Deputy Chief Benfett's presentations, please consider being a champion for mule deer, Wyoming's heritage and legacy, and preserve our freedom in hunting through general season management. We can help mule deer thrive through hunting them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other public comment? Don't think we've got any online or anything like that.
Any virtual?
All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you all for being here today. We will see you tomorrow morning.